All right, hey everyone, welcome back. Ready for another deep dive. Today we're tackling something that affects pretty much everyone in Ontario at some point, our driver's licenses. We're going to be digging into this, what seems to be an excerpt from the Ontario Driver's Handbook, specifically a document labeled FF28.PDF, so quite the catchy title, right? But don't worry, we'll break down all the need-to-know info. We're talking renewals, those dreaded demerit points, and maybe even some surprises along the way.
You hit the nail on the head when you said this affects almost everyone in Ontario. It's interesting, though. This document goes beyond just the basics of learning to drive. It really digs into the responsibility that comes with having an Ontario driver's license.
Yeah, it's like, okay, you passed your test, congratulations, but the journey's just beginning. Now the real learning starts. Speaking of which, something that caught my eye right away was this one-piece license system Ontario has. What's the deal with that?
Ugh, good question. It's all about simplification, really. Your physical license is the only thing you need to carry with you when you're driving. No separate pieces of paper or anything like that. And that photo and signature, don't underestimate them. They're crucial for identification and security.
Yeah, I can imagine getting pulled over and realizing, oh shoot, I left my license at home. That wouldn't be a fun conversation.
Definitely not. It's happened to the best of us, but it's definitely something you want to avoid if you can.
Duly noted. Okay, let's move on to something we all have to deal with eventually. License renewals. I remember hitting a certain age a while back, and suddenly my renewal process wasn't just a quick online thing anymore. Is there some logic to how these renewals work?
Oh, absolutely. There are a few factors at play. Age, the type of license you have, everything matters when it comes to renewals. So for anyone under 80 with a commercial license, those would be classes A, B, C, E, or F. Vision and knowledge tests are required every 5 years. And for those 65 and older with a regular Class D license, same thing. But things get a bit more interesting for Class D drivers under 65.
Ooh, how so?
Hold on to your hats because as of July 1st, 2018, those drivers are now also required to take vision and knowledge tests for renewal.
Whoa, seriously? Both vision and D knowledge just to renew a regular license? That's a pretty big change for a lot of drivers, I imagine.
It is, but think about it this way. It's a way to make sure everyone on the road is still up to par. Our vision changes as we age. Our reaction times might slow down.
Right. It's not like we're all invincible just because we passed a driving test years ago.
Exactly. These tests help catch those changes early and ensure everyone's meeting a certain standard.
It's almost like a checkup for your driving skills, not
Mhm.
just a formality.
That's a great way to put it. I'm sure some people weren't thrilled about the extra tests, but from a safety perspective, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, you know what? I can see the logic there. It's about being proactive, not just waiting for something to happen.
And remember, the stricter requirements for older drivers and those with commercial licenses, it's all about recognizing the increased responsibility those drivers have.
It makes sense when you think about the potential consequences. Okay, let's switch gears and talk about something that can really impact your driving privileges. Demerit points. Reading this section of the handbook felt a bit like a warning sign.
It's definitely something you want to pay attention to. The demerit point system in Ontario is not something to be taken lightly. If you accumulate too many points, you could be facing some serious consequences like license suspension or even cancellation.
Whoa, that's scary stuff. So what kind of things can land you those points?
You name it. Speeding, running red lights, even things that might seem minor can add up quickly.
So ignorance is definitely not bliss when it comes to demerit points.
Absolutely not. Do your research and know the rules of the road inside and out. We won't go through every single infraction here, but consider this deep dive a little nudge to brush up on your knowledge.
Yeah, better safe than sorry, right? I don't want to find out the hard way what those points can cost me.
Nobody does.
Okay, so this next topic honestly surprised me a bit. Medical reporting requirements. I always thought that was just for people driving big trucks or buses.
It's a common misconception. Historically, it was primarily focused on commercial drivers. Their health could potentially impact the safety of a larger number of people.
Right, so it's not just about their own safety, but the safety of everyone else on the road too. But you said it was a common misconception. Does that mean things have changed?
You're right on the money. As of July 1st, 2018, even folks with a regular Class D license might be required to submit medical reports. Now, the frequency depends on your age, but the underlying principle is the same, making sure you're healthy enough to drive safely.
Wow, so even if I just drive my little car to work in the grocery store, I might need a doctor's note. That's a bit of a surprise. What prompted this change?
Well, you might be surprised by how many health conditions can affect driving. Even seemingly minor things like vision changes, new medications, or changes in your sleep patterns can be red
I
flags.
guess it makes sense. I never really thought about it that way.
These medical reports provide an extra layer of safety, ensuring everyone on the road is at their best. Driving is a privilege, not a right, and with that privilege comes a responsibility to be healthy and alert behind the wheel.
So it's like the ministry is saying, we want to make sure everyone's healthy enough to be driving, no matter what kind of vehicle they're in.
Exactly. It's about shifting from a reactive approach to a more proactive one, minimizing risk before something happens, not after.
I like that. So how often are we talking about for these medical reports? Is it the same for everyone?
Not quite. It varies based on age and license class. Commercial drivers, as you might imagine, have more frequent checkups, sometimes even annually. For Class D drivers, it's less frequent. Every 5 years for those under 46, every 3 years for those between 46 and 64, and then annually for anyone 65 or older.
Got it. That's helpful to know. Now, what about if you move or change your name? Let's say you get married or maybe just decide to switch apartments.
You don't need to report every little change, but if your name or address changes permanently, then yes, you need to let the ministry know.
Makes sense. Why is it so important to keep them in the loop about those changes, though?
A few reasons, actually. First off, it ensures your license has accurate information. Imagine getting pulled over and your license showing an old address or a name that doesn't match your other ID.
Yeah, that would be a headache for sure.
And second, it ensures the ministry can contact you if they need to for things like important updates or notices.
Okay, so it's not just about avoiding awkward situations with the police. It's also about making sure the ministry can reach you if something important comes up.
Precisely. And the process for updating your information is pretty straightforward these days, thankfully.
So it's not like the old days where you had to trudge down to the ministry office every time something changed.
Not at all. You've got options now. You can do it online through Service Ontario. You can visit a Service Ontario center in person, or you can even mail in the change of information.
That's convenient. And what about cost? Is there a fee to update this stuff?
Here's a nice surprise. It's completely free.
Wow, a freebie from the government. Color me impressed. So to recap, moving, getting married, changing your identity, tell the ministry they want to stay in the loop just like a good friend.
Exactly. It's a small step that can save you a lot of potential headaches down the line. And remember, if you do change your name, you'll need a new license with an updated photo. You can head to a Service Ontario center for that. They'll issue you a temporary license while you wait for the permanent one to arrive in the mail.
Good to know. So we've covered a lot of ground so far. Renewals, demerit points, medical reports, keeping your info up to date. Anything else we should highlight for our listeners before we wrap up this section?
Actually, yes. This FF28.pdf document we've been referencing includes a link to the Service Ontario website. It's got more details, especially about those new Class D requirements we were talking about. We won't bore you with the whole URL here, but you can find the link in the show notes.
Perfect. We'll make sure to include that for everyone. All right, so there you have it, the essentials of maintaining your Ontario driver's license. It's not just about passing that initial test. It's about being a responsible driver throughout your driving journey.
That's such an important point. We focused on the what today, the practical steps. But I'd encourage you to think about the why behind these rules too. It all comes down to keeping our roads safe for everyone.
Couldn't agree more. It's easy to get caught up in the paperwork and procedures, but ultimately it's about responsible driving and sharing the road safely.
Exactly. On that note, I think we've given our listener a lot to digest. Take some time to absorb this information and see how it applies to your specific situation. Now that you've got the basics, it's time to dive deeper into the specifics that apply to you, your age, your license class, and any unique circumstances you might have.
And remember, even after you've aced all the tests and ticked all the boxes, the real journey happens out there on the road. It's about continuously learning, adapting, and being aware.
That's what it's all about. Responsible driving isn't a destination. It's an ongoing process. A process of awareness, skill building, and a commitment to safety, both for yourself and everyone sharing the road with you.
Couldn't have said it better myself. You've given our listener a lot to ponder today. We've gone from the nitty-gritty details to the bigger picture of what it means to be a responsible driver.
It's been a great discussion. And remember, staying informed and being proactive is key, especially here in Ontario, where the rules and regulations are always evolving.
Well said. To our listener, we say keep learning, stay curious, and above all, drive safely. Until next time, this has been The Deep Dive. Not like the old days, right? You used to have to physically go down there for every little thing.
Oh yeah, totally different now. So much easier. Like I said, you can do it online. Or you can go to a Service Ontario Center if you prefer that.
Ooh.
Or if you love snail mail, you can even mail it in.
Options are always good, right?
Yeah.
What about the cost, though? Is there a fee to update all this stuff?
Okay, ready for some good news? It's absolutely free.
Wow, free. The government giving us something for free. I'm almost shocked. So let me get this straight. If I move, if I get married, change my name, anything like that, I have to tell the ministry. They like to be in the know, just like a good friend.
Exactly. Keeps everything running smoothly, you know? And speaking of changes, if you do change your name for whatever reason, you'll need to get a new license with a new picture and all that. Just head down to Service Ontario and they'll sort you out. They'll even give you a temporary one while you wait for the real deal to arrive in the mail.
Okay, so just to recap, we've talked about renewals, those demerit points, medical reports, keeping your information up to date. Anything else we should flag for our listeners before we move on?
Oh, one more thing. This FF28.pdf document we've been looking at, well, it has a link to the Service Ontario website. There's a bunch more info there if you want to dive even deeper, especially about those new requirements for Class D licenses we talked about earlier. We won't bore you with the whole website address here, but don't worry, you can find it in the show notes. We'll make sure it's easy to find.
Awesome. All right, so to sum it all up, the essentials of taking care of your Ontario driver's license. It's not just about passing that first test, is it?
Nope, not at all. It's about being responsible every time you get behind the wheel, throughout your entire driving life.
We've talked a lot about the what today, all the rules and regulations and what you have to do.
That it's also important to think about the why behind all these rules.
Totally. Sometimes it's easy to get caught up in all the little details.
But at the end of the day, it's all about keeping everyone safe.
It's about sharing the road and looking out for each other. That's what matters.
Couldn't agree more. We've covered a lot today. Hopefully it gives everyone listening some food for thought. Really take some time to think about how this applies to you specifically. Now that you have a good overview, it's time to dig a bit deeper. See what applies to you, your age, your license type, and any unique situations you might have.
Even if you think you got it all figured out, aced all the tests, got all your paperwork in order, it's still a journey. You're always learning when you're out there on the road.
Absolutely. It's all about constantly learning and being aware of what's happening around you.
It's not a destination, being a responsible driver.
You got it. It's an ongoing process. It's about being aware, improving your skills, and always prioritizing safety, both for yourself and everyone else on the road.
Really well said. That about wraps it up for this deep dive, right?
It does. Hopefully we've given everyone listening some things to think about. And just remember, stay informed, stay curious, and drive safe out there.
Couldn't have said it better myself. To everyone listening, keep learning, keep those wheels turning, and we'll see you next time for another deep dive. It's kind of funny when you think about it. We spent all this time talking about rules and regulations and paperwork, but getting your license is really just the very first step.
It really is just the beginning. It's like when you get your learner's permit, you've got the basics, but you still have so much to learn. You're not a pro just because you have a piece of paper.
It's like, okay, you've got permission to learn, but the real learning comes with experience.
Exactly. And that's when things get really interesting. Think about it. When was the last time you really thought about your driving skills? Like, really challenged yourself to improve?
That's a good point. It's easy to get complacent. You've been driving for years. You think, I've got this. But maybe we all need a little reminder to stay sharp sometimes.
Exactly. And luckily, there are tons of resources out there to help us become safer and more skilled drivers. Have you ever thought about taking an advanced driving course?
I haven't. What kind of things do they cover in those courses?
They go way beyond the basic stuff you learn in driver's ed. Things like emergency braking, skid control, defensive driving techniques, how to handle tricky situations.
That sounds really valuable, especially here in Ontario where the weather can change in an instant. Icy roads, snowstorms, things like that. You don't really learn how to deal with those in your regular driving test.
It's all about being prepared, right? Those courses can give you the confidence to know what to do if something unexpected happens.
So it's not just about knowing the rules. It's about having the skills to actually handle those real-life situations.
Exactly. And at the end of the day, it's about taking responsibility for your own safety and the safety of everyone around you.
I think this has been a really eye-opening conversation. We've gone from the nitty-gritty of license renewals to the bigger picture of what it means to be a good driver.
I've really enjoyed it. And to everyone listening, just remember, the best drivers are the ones who are always learning and improving.
Couldn't agree more. Stay informed, stay curious, and most importantly, stay safe out there on the road.
Absolutely. See you next time for another deep dive.
Until then, keep those wheels turning, both in your mind and on the road.
All right, so are you ready to hit the road?
Uh-huh, I think so.
Today we're doing a deep dive into something most of us see every day,
Yeah?
but don't think too much about
Yeah.
the trucking industry.
Right here in Ontario?
Right here in Ontario, yeah.
Yeah.
You sent us a copy of the official Ministry of Transportation Truck Handbook.
Oh, yeah. That's a good
Well, I was pretty surprised by some of the things I found.
Yeah, it's easy to take trucking for granted. Trucks are just kind of magically there with everything we need.
Yeah.
But when you get into it,
Yeah.
it's a whole system of regulations and training
Yeah.
that's keeping things moving smoothly and safely.
And speaking of safety, I was struck by how seriously Ontario takes its trucking standards.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Some of the toughest in North America.
Really?
Yeah. Which makes sense when you consider the sheer scale of the industry here.
Yeah.
We're talking over 58,000 commercial carriers operating within the province.
58,000?
Yeah.
That's a lot of trucks.
It is a lot of trucks.
Wow. Okay, so obviously
Yeah.
not just anyone can just jump behind the wheel of one of those things.
No, definitely not.
The handbook goes into detail about all these different classes of licenses.
Right.
Can you break down like what those are?
Sure.
Especially for like the big rigs?
Yeah, so it's kind of like a tiered system
Okay.
based on the type and size of vehicle you're qualified to drive.
Okay.
So Class A is kind of the king of the road, right?
Okay.
Allows you to operate those massive tractor-trailer combinations.
Oh, wow.
Think 18-wheelers hauling goods across the country.
Yeah.
Those things can be the length of 2 cars.
I never thought about it that way.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So to drive one of those,
Yeah.
you need a very specific license.
You need that Class A.
Yeah. Okay.
And getting that license isn't just passing a quick driving test.
Oh, really?
No, since 2017, Ontario has implemented mandatory entry-level training
Wow.
for all new Class A drivers.
They're all new.
For all new, yeah. So we're talking a 4 to 6 week intensive program,
Wow.
followed by
That's a lot.
a seriously revamped road and knowledge test.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
that makes getting a regular car license look like a walk in the park.
Oh, yeah, definitely, yeah.
So what kind of impact has that stricter training had on the industry?
Well, since the mandatory training came into effect,
Yeah.
there's been a noticeable improvement in safety statistics.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Great.
Accidents involving novice truck drivers have decreased by a significant percentage.
Really?
Yeah.
That's great.
So it really highlights how investing in training can have a real impact on road safety.
Right. So it's not just about keeping the drivers safe,
Yeah.
but it's everyone else sharing the road with them.
Exactly. That's a very good point.
Yeah, okay.
And the commitment to safety goes way beyond just driving skills.
Yeah.
The handbook dives into a whole world of laws and regulations
Yeah.
that govern everything from vehicle maintenance to types of cargo.
Right. I have to admit, I felt a little overwhelmed when I got to that part
Oh, yeah.
about the Highway Traffic Act
Yeah.
and the Dangerous Goods Transportation Act.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah.
But it's all there for a reason,
Okay.
to minimize risk.
Right.
So think of the Highway Traffic Act as like the overarching rule book,
Okay.
covering things like vehicle inspections, load security,
Yeah.
even how many hours a driver can be on the road without a break.
Right.
It's all designed to keep those big rigs operating safely and responsibly.
Okay, so that's like the main one.
Yeah.
And then you've got this other one.
And then there's a whole world of transporting dangerous goods.
Yeah. Which sounds a bit intimidating.
Yeah, it definitely adds another layer of complexity.
Yeah.
The Dangerous Goods Transportation Act gets very specific about how different types of materials need to be handled, from labeling and packaging to emergency response protocols.
Okay.
We're not just talking about like spilled milk here.
Right.
We're talking about things that could pose serious risks if not transported properly.
Yeah. You mentioned different types of dangerous goods.
Right.
How many different types are we talking?
So the handbook breaks them down into 9 distinct classes.
9.
Yeah.
Wow.
And they cover a surprising range of materials.
Oh, okay.
So we're talking everything from flammable liquids and explosives
Right.
to things like corrosive substances or even radioactive materials.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So 9 classes.
9 classes.
That's a lot to keep track of.
It is.
And I can see why specialized training is so important for drivers
Absolutely.
handling those materials.
The training for dangerous goods goes above and beyond the standard Class A requirements.
Okay.
It's a whole other level of expertise.
Right.
Yeah, it's fascinating how much detail goes into ensuring the safe transportation of those materials.
Right, so you need specific training
Yes.
and certification to handle those specific classes.
Exactly. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach,
Okay.
depending on the materials they're transporting.
Okay.
Drivers need to undergo specialized training
Right.
from their employer
Yeah.
and receive a certificate they have to carry with them at all times.
So they're like a mini hazmat expert behind the wheel?
Exactly.
Yeah, pretty much.
It puts into perspective the responsibility that these drivers have.
Oh, yeah, big time.
It's not just driving.
Right.
It's a whole other level
Absolutely.
of expertise and awareness.
For sure.
This handbook really is just scratching the surface.
Yeah, it really is.
It mentions all these other legal documents
Yeah.
that dive even deeper
Absolutely.
into the regulations.
Right.
So you're saying, like, for anyone working in the industry
Yeah.
or really wanting to understand the full scope of things,
Yeah.
you got to go to those documents.
You got to go to the source.
Okay, so we've got the handbook, which is like the Cliff's Notes.
Right.
And then these more in-depth legal documents for the full picture.
Exactly.
I'm actually really curious to learn more about the specific laws
Okay.
and regulations outlined in those modules.
What are some of the key things they cover?
Okay, so the Highway Traffic Act is really like the backbone of trucking regulations in Ontario.
Okay.
And one area it really dives into is vehicle inspections.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah,
Commercial motor vehicle inspections regulation.
that's the one.
That sounds intense.
It is intense.
Yeah.
These aren't your typical once-a-year car inspections
Right.
because of the size and weight of these trucks
Mm-hmm.
and the potential consequences if something goes wrong.
Right.
The inspections are incredibly thorough.
I bet.
We're talking brakes, tires, lights, steering.
Yeah.
Everything needs to be in tip-top shape.
It makes sense that there would be a higher standard for these vehicles.
Absolutely.
I mean, a breakdown in a regular car is one thing.
Yep.
But with a fully loaded tractor trailer,
It's a different story.
the stakes are so much higher.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And it's not just about preventing breakdowns.
Right.
Think about like load security.
Exactly.
There's a whole section in there dedicated to that.
Yeah. Absolutely, the security of loads regulation.
Yes.
You got it.
I remember reading something about cargo needing to be like properly secured
Yes.
to prevent it from shifting or falling off.
That's the one.
Right.
And it's more involved than you might think.
Really?
Different types of cargo require specific securing methods,
Oh, wow.
using things like heavy-duty straps, chains, tarps, even specialized locking mechanisms.
Wow.
Yeah, you don't want a load of lumber coming loose on the 401.
That's a scary thought.
Yeah, not good.
I've seen videos of those kinds of accidents.
Yeah,
And it's not pretty.
no, it's not.
It's amazing how much thought goes into preventing those situations.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It's all these layers of safety.
Layers of safety, yeah.
And then on top of that, you've got driver fatigue.
Right. Driver fatigue, a
Yeah.
major concern in the industry.
Right. The hours of service regulation.
That's it.
That one stood out to me because it's just so important.
Absolute.
Not just for the drivers themselves, but
Yeah.
for everyone on the road. Drowsy driving is dangerous in any vehicle.
Yeah.
But when you're talking about a truck that can weigh upwards of 80,000 pounds.
Yeah, it's exponentially higher risk.
Right.
Yeah. So that's why the regulations set strict limits on how many hours a driver can be behind the wheel
Right.
at a stretch,
Right.
and they mandate regular rest breaks.
Right. So it's not just about preventing accidents.
Right.
It's about making sure the drivers have time to rest and recharge
Yeah,
so they can be alert.
exactly.
So they're trying to build a culture of safety from the ground up.
That's a good way to put it.
Right. Okay. So that was the Highway Traffic Act.
Yes.
Now switching gears to that other big piece of legislation.
Right. The Dangerous Goods Transportation Act.
Yes. We touched on the 9 classes.
Right.
But what else does that act cover?
Well, it really delves into the nitty-gritty
Okay.
of transporting each class of dangerous goods.
Okay.
You can't just throw a container of flammable liquid in the back of a truck
No.
and hit the road.
Right.
There are very specific protocols for everything.
Like, give me an example.
Okay, so
Go.
let's say you're transporting a Class 3 flammable liquid,
Okay.
like gasoline.
Okay.
The Act outlines very specific requirements
Right, dude.
for the type of container it needs to be transported in,
Okay.
how it needs to be labeled and placarded on the truck,
Mm-hmm.
even the specific route the truck is allowed to take.
Wow. I had no idea it was that detailed.
Oh, yeah, it's very specific.
It's like a whole other level of logistics
Yeah.
on top of the regular trucking challenges.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's not just about getting from point A to point B. It's
Yeah.
about all these other factors.
Absolutely.
You know, we talked about the precautions
Yes.
and the specialized training
Right.
for drivers handling dangerous goods.
Mm.
What does that actually involve?
Well, it really depends on the specific class of goods being transported.
Okay.
but it's all about equipping drivers with the knowledge and skills
Yeah.
to handle those materials safely.
Okay.
So they need to be able to identify potential hazards, understand proper handling procedures,
Right.
know what to do in case of an emergency.
Yeah.
It's a lot to take in.
It's like they're hazmat specialists on wheels,
Pretty much. Yeah.
going through all this.
Yeah.
I'm starting to see truck drivers in a whole new light.
Like that.
They're not just drivers.
No.
They're highly trained professionals
absolutely.
that keep our society running.
They really are. It's a critical role.
I think most people just see a truck on the road
Yeah.
and don't think about the person behind the wheel.
Right. Or the complex system that got that truck there.
Exactly.
It's easy to take it for granted.
Totally.
But when you start to peel back the layers,
Yeah.
you realize how much we rely on these drivers
Yeah.
and the entire trucking industry.
And it's fascinating how something so essential to our everyday lives
Yeah.
can be so invisible.
So invisible.
We've only scratched the surface here.
Oh, yeah. Just the tip of the iceberg.
But before we wrap up,
Okay.
curious about one more thing. The handbook briefly mentioned some challenges
Yeah.
facing the trucking industry,
Right.
like driver shortages
Yeah.
and long hours.
Big ones.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about those?
Yeah, for sure. So it's a demanding job, no doubt about it.
Yeah, especially with all this responsibility
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
we've been discussing.
Long hours on the road, tight deadlines,
Mm.
constantly changing routes and regulations.
Wow,
It can really take its toll.
I bet.
And with a growing economy,
Yeah,
increasing demand for goods,
right.
the industry is facing a real shortage of qualified drivers.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it's becoming harder and harder to attract and retain people
Right.
in this profession.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's not just about the driving itself. It's
Yeah.
all the stuff we talked about.
yeah.
The knowledge, the protocols,
Mhm.
the constant vigilance. It takes a special kind of person
It really does.
to handle all of that day in and day out.
You're right. And then you add things like time away from family, health issues, from sitting for so long,
Right.
the stress of navigating traffic and bad weather.
Oh, yeah.
It's no surprise that people shy away from this line of work.
Yeah, it's definitely not a glamorous job,
No, not really.
but it's absolutely essential.
It really is.
This whole deep dive has made me think about all the unseen hands
Yeah.
that go into making our lives work.
It's like a hidden infrastructure.
Yeah.
We depend on this intricate web of transportation to
Right.
keep things running.
Yeah.
But we rarely stop to appreciate the people who make it happen.
You're right. We focus on the inconvenience of traffic.
Yeah.
Or maybe get frustrated when a delivery is delayed,
Mm-hmm.
but we don't always connect those things to the actual people
Right.
doing the work to
Sure.
get those goods where they need to be.
It's easy to forget that there's a real person behind the wheel of that truck
Yeah.
dealing with all the challenges and pressures.
Right.
They're not robots.
Yeah.
They're skilled professionals working under difficult conditions.
Yeah. This whole conversation has definitely shifted my perspective.
I'm glad to hear that.
Knowing what I know now
Yeah.
about the training, the regulations, the risks,
Right.
it makes you see those trucks on the road in a whole new light.
Absolutely. And that brings us to a question for you, the listener.
Okay.
Thinking about everything we've covered today, how do you perceive truck drivers on the road?
That's a good question.
Do you have a newfound respect for the profession?
Right.
Or do you still see them as just another obstacle in your commute?
Yeah, it's a chance to reflect on what we've learned
Absolutely.
and consider how it might change our own attitudes
Yeah.
and behaviors on the road.
Exactly. Maybe the next time you see a truck, instead of feeling annoyed,
Right.
you'll take a moment to appreciate the journey that truck has made,
Yeah.
the driver who's skillfully navigating those roads,
Right.
the entire system that brought those goods to your city,
Yeah.
your store.
Your doorstep.
Yeah.
It's easy to get caught up in our own little worlds.
It's-
But this has been a good reminder that we're all connected in ways we don't always see,
Mm-hmm.
and that the people who keep those connections running
Yeah.
deserve our respect and appreciation.
Well said. Couldn't agree more.
It's been a pleasure exploring this topic with you.
Likewise.
And to our listeners, we hope you've enjoyed this deep dive into Ontario's trucking world.
Yeah, a lot more to it than meets the eye.
It is a complex and often overlooked industry,
Yeah.
but one that plays a vital role in all our lives.
Absolutely.
Until next time, keep those wheels turning. And remember,
Yeah.
knowledge is power.
Knowledge is power. Long hours on the road, tight deadlines, constantly changing routes and regulations.
Wow.
It can really take its toll.
I bet.
And with a growing economy,
Yeah.
increasing demand for goods,
Right.
the industry is facing a real shortage of qualified drivers.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it's becoming harder and harder to attract and retain people
Right.
in this profession.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
It's not just about the driving itself.
No.
It's all the stuff we talked about.
Absolutely.
The knowledge, the protocols,
Mhm.
the constant vigilance.
Yeah,
It takes a special kind of person
he really does.
to handle all of that day in and day out.
You're right. And then you add things like time away from family,
Right.
health issues, from sitting for so long,
Right.
the stress of navigating traffic and bad weather.
Oh, yeah.
It's no surprise that people shy away from this line of work.
Yeah, it's definitely not a glamorous job.
No, not really.
But it's absolutely essential.
It really is.
This whole deep dive has made me think about all the unseen hands
Yeah.
that go into making our lives work.
It's like a hidden infrastructure.
Yeah,
We depend on this intricate web of transportation
right.
to keep things running.
Yeah,
But we rarely stop to appreciate the people who make it happen.
you're right. We focus on the inconvenience of traffic,
Yeah.
or maybe get frustrated when a delivery is delayed.
Hmm.
But we don't always connect those things to the actual people doing
Right.
the work. Exactly. To get those goods where they need to be.
It's easy to forget that there's a real person behind the wheel of that truck,
Yeah,
dealing with all the challenges and pressures.
right.
They're not robots.
Yeah.
They're skilled professionals working under difficult conditions.
Yeah, this whole conversation has definitely shifted my perspective.
I'm glad to hear that.
Knowing what I know now
Yeah.
about the training, the regulations, the
Mhm.
risks,
Right.
it makes you see those trucks on the road in a whole new light.
Absolutely. And that brings us to a question for you, the listener.
Okay.
Thinking about everything we've covered today, how do you perceive truck drivers on the road?
That's a good question.
Do you have a newfound respect for the profession?
Right.
Or do you still see them as just another obstacle in your commute?
Yeah, it's a chance to reflect on what we've learned
Absolutely.
and consider how it might change our own attitudes
Yeah,
and behaviors on the road.
exactly. Maybe the next time you see a truck, instead of feeling annoyed,
Right.
you'll take a moment to appreciate the journey that truck has made.
Yeah.
The driver who's skillfully navigating those roads.
Right.
The entire system that brought those goods to your city,
Yeah.
your store.
Your doorstep.
Yeah,
It's easy to get caught up in our own little worlds.
it really is.
But this has been a good reminder that we're all connected
Excellent.
in ways we don't always see,
Mhm.
and that the people who keep those connections running
Yeah.
deserve our respect and appreciation.
Well said. Couldn't agree more.
It's been a pleasure exploring this topic with you.
Likewise.
And to our listeners, we hope you've enjoyed this deep dive into Ontario's trucking world.
Yeah, a lot more to it than meets the eye.
It is a complex and often overlooked industry,
Yeah,
but one that plays a vital role in all our lives.
absolutely.
Until next time, keep those wheels turning and remember,
Yeah.
knowledge is power.
Knowledge is power. It's a demanding job, no doubt about it.
Yeah, especially with all this responsibility.
Oh, yeah,
We've
absolutely.
been discussing.
Long hours on the road, tight deadlines, constantly changing routes and regulations.
Wow.
It can really take its toll.
I bet.
And with a growing economy,
Yeah,
increasing demand for goods,
right.
the industry's facing a real shortage of qualified drivers.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it's becoming harder and harder to attract and retain people
Right.
in this profession.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's
Yeah.
not just about the driving itself.
No,
It's all the stuff we talked about.
absolutely.
The knowledge, the protocols,
Mhm.
the constant vigilance.
Yeah,
It takes a special kind of person
it really is.
to handle all of that day in and day out.
You're right. And then you add things like time away from family,
Right,
health issues from
Yeah.
sitting for so long,
right.
the stress of navigating traffic and bad weather.
Oh, yeah.
It's no surprise that people shy away from this line of work.
Yeah, it's definitely not a glamorous job,
No, not really.
but it's absolutely essential.
It really is.
This whole deep dive has made me think about all the unseen hands that go into making our lives work.
It's like a hidden infrastructure.
Yeah,
We depend on this intricate web of transportation
right.
to keep things running,
Yeah,
but we rarely stop to appreciate the people who make it happen.
you're right. We focus on the inconvenience of traffic,
Yeah.
or maybe get frustrated when a delivery is delayed.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't always connect those things to the actual people
Yeah.
doing the work
Exactly.
to get those goods where they need to be.
It's easy to forget that there's a real person behind the wheel of that truck,
Yeah,
dealing with all the challenges and pressures we've discussed.
right.
They're not robots.
Yeah.
They're skilled professionals working under difficult conditions.
This whole conversation has definitely shifted my perspective.
I'm glad to hear that.
Knowing what I know now
Yeah.
about the training, the regulations, the
Mm.
risks,
Right.
It makes you see those trucks on the road in a whole new light.
Absolutely. And that brings us to a question for you, the listener. Thinking about everything we've covered today, how do you perceive truck drivers on the road?
That's a good question.
Do you have a newfound respect for the profession?
Right.
Or do you still see them as just another obstacle in your commute?
Yeah, it's a chance to reflect on what we've learned and
Absolutely.
consider how it might change our own attitudes,
Yeah.
behaviors on the road.
Exactly. Maybe the next time you see a truck, instead of feeling annoyed, you'll take a moment to appreciate the journey that truck has made.
Yeah.
The driver who's skillfully navigating those roads.
Right.
The entire system that brought those goods to your city.
Yeah.
Your store.
Your doorstep.
Yeah,
It's easy to get caught up in our own little worlds,
it really is.
but this has been a good reminder that we're all connected
I
in
know
ways
that.
we don't always see,
Hmm.
and that the people who keep those connections running
Yeah.
deserve our respect and appreciation.
Well said. Couldn't agree more.
It's been a pleasure exploring this topic with you.
Likewise.
And to our listeners, we hope you've enjoyed this deep dive into Ontario's trucking world.
Yeah, a lot more to it than meets the eye.
It is a complex and often overlooked industry,
Yeah.
but one that plays a vital role in all our lives.
Oh, absolutely.
Until next time, keep those wheels turning, and remember,
Yeah.
knowledge is power.
Knowledge is power.
All right, ready to dive into something a little different today?
Always up for a challenge.
We're tackling stopping regulations in Ontario.
Sounds dry, but it's important.
Absolutely. Life-saving stuff, really. You might think it's all common sense, but trust me, there are some surprises.
It's easy to fall into habits and forget the finer points.
Exactly. And that's what we're here for. We're going to break down the rules you need to know using this handy source material.
We'll cover those everyday situations, like railway crossings,
School zones, pedestrian crossovers, the works.
and not just what the rules are, but why they exist.
Because understanding the why can make you a safer, more aware driver.
Couldn't agree more.
So first up, railway crossings. Those red and white X signs, everyone knows them.
Familiar sight? But have you ever considered just how long it takes a freight train to stop?
No, not really.
Over 2 kilometers. Imagine 12 city blocks.
Wow, that puts things in perspective.
Definitely emphasizes the need for caution.
Big time. So let's walk through this using diagram 2.2 from the source. As you approach a crossing, slow down, listen for trains, look both ways.
Basic, but you'd be surprised how many people skip that step.
Totally. Then, if it's safe, proceed. But always be ready to stop if a train appears.
Right, because if a train's coming, you gotta stop.
Yeah.
At least 5 meters from the nearest rail or gate.
No, trying to beat the train, right?
Yeah, that's a race you'll never win. And this is interesting. The source mentions even private roads might have unmarked crossings.
Unmarked. Now that's a little scary.
It is, isn't it? Emphasizes the need to be vigilant.
Definitely makes you think twice about potential blind spots.
Absolutely. Always stay alert, even on familiar routes.
Okay, so we've talked about approaching crossings, but what about those with lights and gates?
Those signals are there for a reason. Pay attention. Wait for the lights to stop flashing before even considering crossing. And if there's a gate, make sure it's fully up.
Makes sense, though I've seen people try to weave around those gates.
It's unbelievable. Not only dangerous, it's illegal. Those gates are there to protect you.
Speaking of protection, what happens if you're stuck on the traps? Like in heavy traffic?
Yeah,
Nightmare scenario.
it is. And the source is clear. If your vehicle's stuck on a crossing, priority 1 is getting everyone out and away from the tracks fast.
And no time to waste.
Exactly. Move at least 15 meters away to a safe spot and immediately call for help.
So basically, get out, get clear, get help. Got it.
Precisely.
Okay, moving on. Let's talk school zones. High alert areas, no doubt.
Kids can be unpredictable, so their safety comes first.
Absolutely. And diagram 2.3 from the source highlights a key rule. When you see a school crossing guard, full stop before the crossing.
You stay stopped until everyone's crossed safely. The crossing guard, too. No exceptions.
Patience is key.
And not just about avoiding a fine. It's about potentially saving a life.
Couldn't agree more.
Though speaking of fines, failing to stop for a crossing guard, pretty hefty.
Yeah.
Big fine. Plus 3 demerit points. Not worth the risk.
Yeah.
Okay, now onto those big yellow buses.
A classic symbol of school days.
Chrome yellow, clearly marked school bus. Hard to miss.
And for good reason. It's a big warning sign, especially those flashing red lights on top.
Those are serious business. When you see those, it means stop. Doesn't matter if you're approaching from the front or back.
Nope, doesn't matter how many lanes or what the speed limit is. School bus law applies everywhere, every time.
There's got to be a good reason for that.
Kids are vulnerable getting on and off the bus.
Yeah.
Might dart out unexpectedly.
Right. Need that safe zone around the bus.
Exactly. So let's look at diagrams 2.4 and 2.5 from the source. They lay out stopping distances.
Okay, good visuals.
Approaching a bus from behind. Got to stop at least 20 meters away. Think about 2 school buses parked end to end.
Wow, that's further than I imagined.
Yeah, and remember, applies even with multiple lanes.
So no scooting by in the next lane.
Nope. Flashing red lights, you stop, period. But what about when the bus is stopped, but no flashing lights? Like when they're picking up kids at a designated stop, no crossing involved?
Good question.
You don't have to stop then. But still proceed with caution, especially if there are kids around.
Always better to be safe, especially around kids.
Absolutely. And here's another thing. School buses aren't just on the road during school hours.
Oh, right, field trips and all that.
Exactly. So even weekends, evenings, you still need to be on the lookout.
Okay, back to those flashing red lights. We know they mean stop, but anything else drivers should know?
Well, there's also that stop sign arm that swings out from the driver's side. You know, those same flashing red lights at the top and bottom?
Oh, right, like a mobile stop sign.
Exactly. Swings out after the upper lights start flashing.
Right.
Drivers have to stay put until it folds back and all the lights are off.
So it's not just the lights, it's the arm, too.
Like the bus is saying, hey, I'm serious, don't pass.
And ignoring that can have some serious consequences.
No kidding. Failing to stop for a school bus. Big trouble.
Let's talk numbers. What are the penalties?
First offense, we're talking a fine between $400 and $2,000 plus 6 demerit points.
Wow.
And that's just the first time. Second conviction within 5 years. It gets worse.
How much worse?
Fines from $4,000 to $4,000, another 6 demerit points, and you could even face jail time. Up to 6 months.
No joke. Those are some serious consequences.
It shows how seriously they take child safety. These rules are there for a reason.
So even if you think no one's watching, think again. Because bus drivers, other people can report you if you pass illegally.
And here's the kicker. Even if you weren't driving, if it's your car, you could be held responsible.
Yikes. So if you lend your car out, make sure they know the rules.
Absolutely. Ignorance is no excuse when it comes to kid safety.
Okay, one last twist about those buses.
Oh yeah, this one's interesting.
They have to stop at all railway crossings, but they don't use the upper flashing red lights for those stops.
Nope. Don't want drivers to confuse it with a regular stop.
So how do you know they're stopping?
They use their regular hazard lights.
Okay, that makes sense. But it means you got to be extra careful when you see a bus near a crossing.
Absolutely. Always stay alert. Anticipate those hazards.
Okay, we've covered a lot about railway crossings and school zones. Now on to another common scenario. Pedestrian crossovers.
Those designated crossing areas where there aren't any traffic signals.
Right. Often marked with signs, pavement markings, sometimes even those overhead flashing yellow lights.
The ones pedestrians can activate to warn drivers they're crossing.
Right. Seems pretty straightforward. Stop for pedestrians. But are there any specific things drivers need to know?
You bet. First off, gotta stop and wait for pedestrians to completely cross before you move. That means the pedestrian and any school crossing guard with them have to be on the sidewalk.
Okay, so all clear before you go.
Right. And there's a rule about passing vehicles near those crossovers. Can't pass any vehicle within 30 meters of one. Think about 3 parked cars.
So even if you're tempted to scoot by, don't.
Nope. That 30 meters is there for safety. Pedestrians might be crossing or getting ready to.
Right, safety first. And speaking of passing, let me just emphasize this. Never, ever pass a vehicle that's stopped for pedestrians.
Absolutely not. Dangerous and illegal.
All right, I think we've covered a lot of ground already.
We have. It's a lot to take in.
Maybe you should take a breather and then come back to recap some key takeaways.
Sounds like a good plan.
Okay, let's take a minute to digest all that info about stopping in Ontario. Lots to remember, but it comes down to some pretty simple ideas, right?
Yeah, for sure. It's all about being aware, being careful, and respecting everyone else on the road.
Exactly. So let's recap those key takeaways. Railway crossings, school zones, pedestrian crossovers. Starting with those railway crossings, what's the one thing you want listeners to really remember?
I'd say it's this. Trains are huge, fast, and they take forever to stop. So when you see those red and white X signs, treat them like a giant flashing warning. Slow down, listen up, look both ways, and never try to race a train.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Now, what about school zones? What's the most important thing for drivers to keep in mind?
Well, it's all about protecting kids. They don't always have the same awareness as adults, right? So the golden rule is extra caution and patience, especially when you see those crossing guards or those big yellow buses with their flashing red lights.
Oh, yeah, those flashing red lights. We made it pretty clear ignoring those is not an option. Stop at a safe distance, wait patiently, and don't even think about passing until those lights are off and that stop sign arm is folded away.
And remember, that goes for whether you're behind the bus or coming at it from the front. No exceptions.
Right, no exceptions. Now, pedestrian crossovers. Key takeaway there.
Simple. Yield to pedestrians. See someone waiting to cross at a marked crosswalk. Slow down, come to a complete stop, let them cross safely, then you can go. And never, ever pass a vehicle that's stopped for pedestrians.
So important. Okay, we've got the basic rules down, but what does all this mean for you, the listener, as a driver in Ontario?
It means this. Being aware of these stopping rules isn't just about dodging fines or demerit points, though those are definitely good motivators. It's about realizing these rules are meant to protect the people who are most vulnerable on the roads.
Pedestrians, kids, cyclists, people using mobility devices, everyone deserves to feel safe, right?
Absolutely. And by following these rules, we all contribute to a safer, more harmonious driving environment for everyone.
Well said. It's interesting to think about the reasons behind these rules. They're not just random. They're about respect for human life and sharing responsibility.
Exactly. Something to think about. We all have a part to play in making our roads safer.
Okay, let's try something. Imagine you're driving along, you see a school bus up ahead, stopped, red lights flashing. What goes through your mind?
Honestly, first thing is always safety. I start slowing down right away, looking for kids getting on or off. Reminds me to be extra alert, extra patient. You know, those kids might not be paying as much attention to traffic as they should.
Like that heightened awareness kicks in?
Yeah, exactly. It's the key to safe driving, really. Being proactive, anticipating what might happen.
Makes sense. Now let's switch gears. Railway crossing. You're approaching, lights are flashing, gates are coming down. What are you thinking?
For me, it's about patience and staying alert. I always double check for a train, even though the gates are down. I've heard too many stories about, gates malfunctioning or trains coming faster than you'd expect.
It's a good reminder those safety devices are there for a reason, but they're not perfect. You always have to make the final call.
Exactly. No taking chances at a railway crossing. Not worth the risk.
Definitely not. Okay, last one. You're driving through a neighborhood, see a pedestrian waiting at a crosswalk. What goes through your head?
Well, I always try to make eye contact with them, let them know I see them and I'm going to stop. It's a little thing, but I think it helps create some mutual respect between drivers and pedestrians.
It's like a silent conversation. You're saying, hey, your safety matters.
Right. And then, of course, I come to a complete stop, wait for them to cross safely, then I go when it's clear.
I think these scenarios really highlight how these stopping rules are about more than just the law. It's about creating a culture of awareness, respect, and sharing responsibility on the road.
Couldn't agree more. It's about making our roads safer and, well, more harmonious for everyone.
So true. Okay, let's zoom out a bit. Big picture time. How do these specific rules and the ideas behind them contribute to overall road safety in Ontario?
That's a great question. I think one of the most important things is they help create a consistent, predictable flow of traffic. When everyone knows and follows the rules, there's less uncertainty, less risk of collisions.
Like everyone's speaking the same language on the road.
Exactly. And by consistently enforcing these rules, we send a clear message. Safety matters. It's a top priority.
It's about creating a culture of accountability.
Right. When drivers know there are consequences for breaking the rules, they're more likely to be careful, make responsible choices.
So it's not just about punishing people, it's about preventing bad things from happening in the first place.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And in the end, I think that means fewer accidents, fewer injuries, fewer people losing their lives on our roads.
Okay, before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with one last thought. Ready for this?
Hit me with it.
All right, here it is. Think beyond the specific scenarios we talked about today. Those times when you're legally required to stop your car. Think about all the times in life, big and small, when the ability to pause, assess, and make a conscious choice can make all the difference. It's kind of deep, right? Like how that idea of stopping, it pops up everywhere.
It really does. Think about those times when you're, feeling overwhelmed, stressed out. Sometimes the best thing to do is just hit pause.
Yeah.
Take a breather. Figure out what's going on.
It's like they say, sometimes you got to stop running and face things head on.
Exactly. And it's not just about, the bad stuff either. Stopping can be about noticing the good things too,
Yeah.
right? Those moments of joy, those little wins we might rush past.
Yeah, savoring the good times instead of just plowing through them.
Right, and it's about making choices, consciously. Choosing to stop and help someone out, choosing to walk away from something toxic, choosing a path that, feels right for you.
It's funny how those ideas we talked about with driving, awareness, caution, respect, they apply to so much more than just being behind the wheel.
I think it shows how everything's connected. Skills we learned in one area can help us in others.
So true. So next time you're pulling up to a railway crossing, a school zone, a pedestrian crossover, remember those rules we covered. But also think about how those ideas of stopping, looking, listening, how they play out in other parts of your life.
Be present, be mindful. Make choices that lead to a safer, more fulfilling journey. On the road and off.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Feels like we covered a lot today. And not just about how far to stop your car.
It's been a good conversation.
Big thanks to all our listeners for joining us on this deep dive into stopping regulations in Ontario. Hope you learned something new, maybe even had a few light bulb moments.
Drive safe out there, everyone. And remember, sometimes the best journeys start with a pause. Hey, everyone, and welcome back. You ever just look at your driver's license and wonder what all those different classes actually mean?
Yeah, for sure. It's like a secret code.
Right, like ADFG. It's alphabet soup. But the soup determines what you can and can't drive.
Exactly. And today we're going to crack the code.
We're going deep into Ontario's driver's license classes,
Yeah.
using excerpts from the official Ministry of Transportation Truck Handbook.
Yeah, that's right. We'll be looking at everything from those familiar cars and vans to the massive trucks you see on the highway.
It's like a choose-your-own-adventure, but for driving.
That's a great way to put it.
So let's start with the basics, the classes most of us encounter every day.
Okay, so the foundation, the starting point for most drivers is Class G.
Right.
This is your all-access pass to the world of personal vehicles. Cars, vans, small trucks.
Okay, so Class G is your everyday driver's license. But what if you're dreaming of something a bit bigger, like a school bus full of kids?
Ah, now you're talking about a whole different level of responsibility. To handle a bus full of passengers, you'd need a Class F license. That's a big step up. It's like leveling up in a driving game, right? You start with a basic car, then maybe graduate to a minivan, and finally unlock the school bus, or even a big rig down the line.
I like that analogy. And just like in those games, Ontario has a graduated licensing system to help new drivers gradually gain experience and skills.
Right, we've all been there, the G1, the G2, those nighttime driving restrictions.
Exactly. It's all about easing new drivers into the complexities of the road. And it looks like they have a similar system for motorcycles with the M1 and M2 licenses.
Yeah, I remember those. And what's interesting is that M2 license has a zero tolerance policy for alcohol.
No exceptions.
Okay.
I think that really highlights how seriously Ontario takes motorcycle safety, especially for newer riders.
Motorcycles are inherently riskier, so yeah, any measures to increase safety, especially early on, are crucial. The handbook also mentions an L condition and an M condition for motorcycle licenses, but it doesn't really explain what they are.
Those conditions restrict you to specific types of motorcycles.
So, like, what kind of restrictions are we talking about?
Well, for example, the L condition might limit you to lower-powered motorcycles or scooters.
Okay, that makes sense.
Start small.
Work your way up.
Exactly. And then the M condition might restrict you to three-wheeled motorcycles. It's all about ensuring riders progressively develop their skills before hopping on more powerful or complex machines.
So, even within a single license class, there are these subcategories that fine-tune what you're allowed to drive based on your experience and the vehicle's capabilities.
Precisely. It's a layered system designed to match drivers with vehicles appropriately ensuring safety for everyone on the road.
Okay, so we've covered those basic classes, but there's one more letter that jumps out at me in the handbook, the Z endorsement. What's that all about?
Ah, the Z endorsement.
Yeah.
That's essential for anyone operating vehicles equipped with air brake systems.
Air brakes. That sounds pretty heavy duty.
It is. Typically, you're talking about larger trucks and buses. Those vehicles are in a whole different weight class.
Yeah, I can only imagine the stopping power you need for one of those things must be incredible.
Exactly. Air brakes work differently than standard hydraulic brakes. They're more complex and require specialized training to operate safely.
So it's not just about knowing how to drive, it's about understanding the specific systems that control those massive vehicles.
Right. A lack of understanding of air brake systems could have disastrous consequences.
Okay, now you're making me nervous about those big trucks.
But hey, that's why we have these licenses and endorsements, to make sure that only qualified drivers are handling those powerful machines.
That makes sense. So the Z endorsement is like a badge of honor. It shows you've got the skills to handle the big stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a sign that you've gone the extra mile to understand the complexities of air brake systems and that you're committed to operating those vehicles safely.
All right, so we've got a good handle on the different classes, but the handbook also throws a bunch of technical definitions at us. Gross weight, registered gross weight. It's enough to make your head spin.
Yeah, those definitions might seem like technical jargon at first, but they have real-world implications for safety, legality, even the cost of operating a vehicle.
Okay, so let's break them down, starting with gross weight. What does that even mean?
Gross weight refers to the total weight of the vehicle and everything. It's carrying passengers, cargo, even that spare tire in the trunk. It's everything.
So it's like the all-inclusive weight of the vehicle.
Exactly. And then you have registered gross weight, which is the maximum weight your vehicle is legally allowed to weigh.
Ah, so that's based on your vehicle's registration and any permits you might have?
Right. It's like a weight budget for your vehicle. You're paying for the right to haul a certain amount, and going over that limit can have serious consequences.
Yeah, consequences like what? Hefty fines.
For sure. But more importantly, exceeding your vehicle's weight limits puts a huge strain on its components. Tires, brake suspension, which increases the risk of mechanical failure and potentially a serious accident.
So it's not just about avoiding a ticket. It's about understanding those weight limits are there for a reason, to protect you, your vehicle, and everyone else on the road.
Exactly. And there's another important weight definition we need to talk about, MGVWR, or Manufacturer's Gross Vehicle Weight Rating.
Okay, another acronym. Hit me with it.
This number set by the vehicle's manufacturer tells you the absolute maximum weight it can handle safely.
So that's like the ultimate weight limit, the red line you absolutely cannot cross no matter what.
Exactly. It's based on the structural strength of the vehicle, the capacity of its brakes and suspension, all sorts of factors that determine how much weight it can handle without risking catastrophic failure.
Got it. So you're telling me buying a vehicle isn't just about picking the color you like. It's about understanding these weight limits and how they impact what you can realistically do with that vehicle.
Absolutely. These considerations become even more critical when we step into the world of heavy-duty trucking, the realm of the A&D licenses.
We'll definitely be getting into those in a bit. But
But-
before we do that, there are a couple more definitions I want to unpack. Motor vehicle versus just plain vehicle. And then there's that whole trailer situation.
Yeah, those might seem like legal nitpicking, but they actually have important implications for how the rules of the road are applied.
Okay, color me intrigued. Let's dive into those definitions after a quick break.
Sounds good. Let's do it.
All right, so before we get into those A&D licenses, we were talking about those other definitions, motor vehicle versus just plain vehicle. And then there's trailer, too. It seems like they're all the same thing, but I'm guessing there are some subtle differences.
Yeah, those little details matter, especially when it comes to the law.
Okay, so help me out here. What's the difference between a motor vehicle and a vehicle?
Think of it like this motor vehicle is anything with an engine. So
Yeah.
your car, truck, motorcycle, even that little electric scooter your neighbor zips around on, those are all motor vehicles.
Okay, that makes sense. So is vehicle just like a bigger category?
Exactly. It includes all those things with engines, plus anything else that moves people or things.
Yeah.
So bicycles, horse-drawn carriages, even those futuristic electric skateboards.
Ah, so it's like a broader term that covers all modes of transportation.
Precisely.
Hmm.
And that distinction is important because different rules and regulations might apply depending on whether something is classified as a motor vehicle or just a vehicle.
Okay, I could see how that could get tricky, especially with all the new types of transportation popping up these days.
Right. It's all about making sure the law can adapt to those changes. And then there's the whole trailer thing.
Yeah, that one always confused me. It's attached to the vehicle, so why is it considered separate?
Well, legally speaking, a trailer is its own vehicle.
Yeah.
Even though it's being towed by another vehicle.
So it's like a vehicle within a vehicle.
In a way. And that distinction has some important implications. For example, you need to register and insure your trailer separately from your towing vehicle.
That makes sense. You wouldn't want someone towing a massive uninsured trailer and causing an accident without any liability coverage.
Exactly. And there might be different traffic laws that apply to the trailer versus the towing vehicle.
Interesting. So it's not just about hitching up your boat and hitting the open road. There's a whole set of legal and safety considerations specific to trailers that drivers need to be aware of.
Absolutely.
Hey.
And all these definitions, they highlight how important it is to really understand the language of the road. It's not just about passing a test, it's about being a responsible driver.
Right. It's about recognizing those words in the handbook aren't just abstract concepts. They represent real vehicles, real people, and real situations where a lack of understanding could have serious consequences.
Well said. And speaking of real vehicles, let's circle back to that self-propelled implement of husbandry definition. We kind of glossed over that one earlier.
Yeah, I'm so curious about that one. It seems a bit out of place in a driver's license handbook. Most
Right.
people don't think of tractors and combines when they think of driving.
It's all about recognizing the unique driving landscape of Ontario,
Mhm.
especially in rural areas, where you're more likely to encounter farm vehicles on public roads.
Right, you don't see too many tractors cruising down city streets.
Exactly. And while you might not need a standard driver's license to operate a self-propelled implement of husbandry on private property, things change when they venture onto public roads.
So it's about making sure those drivers are following the rules of the road and that other drivers know how to share the road safely with them.
Exactly. They might move slower, have limited visibility, or make wide turns that require extra space and patience from other drivers. It's crucial for everyone to understand the unique characteristics of these vehicles and adjust their driving accordingly.
You know, it's amazing how this deep dive into driver's licenses is revealing all these interconnected aspects of road safety. It's not just about knowing how to operate your own vehicle, it's about understanding the rules, the different vehicle types, and the shared responsibility we all have for creating a safe environment for everyone.
Absolutely. It's like a complex dance with all these different players moving together in a coordinated way. And the music. That's the rules of the road, the license classifications, the vehicle definitions, and the understanding we bring to our role as drivers.
Okay, so we've explored the world of definitions and those everyday license classes. Now let's shift gears and head into the realm of heavy-duty trucking. Are you ready to unpack the A&D licenses?
Absolutely. Let's delve into the world of professional trucking and explore what it takes to handle those powerful machines that keep our economy moving.
Okay, so we're finally here, the A&D licenses, the big leagues of driving.
That's right. These are the licenses that let you handle those massive trucks you see on the highway, hauling everything from cars to construction equipment.
It's a whole different world out there when you're behind the wheel of one of those rigs.
It is. It demands a whole other level of skill and responsibility.
We've already talked about some of the key differences between the classes, like the weight restrictions for towing.
Right.
But I'm curious, what really sets a Class A driver apart from a Class D driver?
Picture this. You're driving down the highway, and you see one of those massive tractor trailers hauling two full-length trailers behind it. That's a Class A driver in action.
Wow, that's a lot of responsibility.
It is. They're trained to handle any combination of vehicles where the total towed weight is over 4,600 kilograms.
That's incredible. So Class A drivers are basically the kings and queens of the road.
I'd say so. They need a deep understanding of weight distribution braking distances and the impact those massive vehicles have on other drivers.
It's not something you just pick up overnight.
Definitely not. It takes a lot of training and experience to become a skilled Class A driver.
So what about Class D drivers? Where do they fit in?
They're also essential to the flow of goods and services. They handle those vehicles, towing heavier trailers, but they had to stay under that 4,600 kilogram limit.
So like what kind of vehicles are we talking about here?
Think of those box trucks making deliveries or dump trucks hauling construction materials.
Hmm.
They might not be as visually imposing as those tractor trailers, but they're just as important.
So it's like different weight classes in boxing.
Yeah, I like that analogy. You've got your heavyweights and your middleweights, each with their own set of skills and challenges.
So how do you actually get one of these licenses? Is it the same process as getting a regular car license?
Well, there are two pathways. The traditional route is through a drive test center. Written tests, road tests, all that.
Yeah, the good old-fashioned way.
Right. But there's also an alternative route through what's called a recognized authority.
That's
It's basically a program or a course offered by an employer or a community college that's been approved by the Ministry of Transportation.
So it's like a more specialized training program specifically for truck drivers.
Exactly. It's designed to make sure those drivers have the skills and knowledge they need to operate those vehicles safely and effectively.
That makes sense. And it looks like even if you're just learning to drive a truck, you still need to have someone with experience in the passenger seat.
That's right. If you have a regular G license and you're practicing to drive a truck, you need to be accompanied by someone who already has a Class D or A license.
So it's like having a mentor guiding you through the process.
Exactly. They can provide valuable insights and help you develop those essential skills.
You know, it's amazing how much thought and detail has gone into Ontario's driver's licensing system. It's like a carefully crafted puzzle where every piece fits together to create a framework for safe and responsible driving.
I agree. It's all about making sure the right people are behind the wheel of the right vehicles, and that everyone on the road is aware of the rules and responsibilities that come with driving.
It's a reminder that driving isn't just a privilege, it's a responsibility.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today. We've gone from those basic car licenses all the way up to those massive tractor trailers.
We've decoded the alphabet soup of driver's license classes.
Exactly. And I hope our listeners now have a better understanding of what those letters and numbers really mean.
It's not just about memorizing information. It's about using that knowledge to make informed decisions behind the wheel.
And to appreciate the complexity and importance of driver training and licensing.
Absolutely.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. But as always, we encourage you to keep on learning, keep on exploring, and keep on driving safely.
Safe travels, everyone.
And until next time, keep on diving deep. All right, buckle up, everyone, because today we're taking a deep dive into a world you might not expect.
Interesting.
We're hitting the road. Yeah, but not the way you might think.
Where are we headed?
We're diving deep into the world of truck driving tests.
Oh, wow. That's not what I was picturing.
You and me both, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
But I think this is going to be fascinating.
I'm intrigued already.
We've got some official guides here that lay out everything you need to know to pass these tests.
Oh, so like a behind-the-scenes look at what it takes to get behind the wheel of a big rig.
Exactly. We're talking documents F-34, F-35, FF-36, the real deal, and I gotta say,
Lay it on me.
I'm already amazed by the level of detail in these things.
I bet. What's caught your eye so far?
Well, just take the in-cab inspection checklist in document F-34.
Okay, in-cab inspection.
It's intense. I mean, I check my mirrors and make sure my seat's adjusted before I hit the road.
Of course, safety first.
But this is next level. They're checking everything. Gauges, seatbelts.
I wouldn't expect anything less, though, right? With those massive vehicles.
You're telling me even the wipers and the heater have to be in perfect working order.
Yeah, it makes sense when you think about the kind of responsibility these drivers have.
Right. Hauling tons of cargo across the country.
Exactly. Any malfunction, no matter how small, could have major consequences.
It's kind of blowing my mind, actually.
Well, think about this. The driver's seat has to be not just securely bolted down,
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
but it also has to stay in position.
Whoa. So even if you hit a bump or slam on the brakes,
It can't move.
imagine if that seat suddenly gave way mid-drive.
It doesn't even bear thinking about.
It's suddenly making me appreciate that little lever that adjusts my seat a whole lot more.
You and me both. And speaking of things that could be disastrous,
Yeah, let's talk about
emergency equipment.
That's another thing that caught my eye in the document.
What about it?
The type of cargo the truck is carrying actually dictates what kind of emergency gear the driver needs.
Oh, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah. Like hauling hazardous materials,
Right, you'd need specific gear for that.
different from if you were transporting, say, livestock.
Makes sense. A different set of tools for a different situation.
It's really highlighting just how much specialized knowledge a truck driver needs to have.
I mean, it's not just about driving. It's about risk assessment and safety protocols for every possible scenario.
It's a whole other level of expertise.
It really is.
Okay, so we've talked about in-cab inspections and emergency gear, but there's a lot more to this.
Yeah, what else is on the agenda?
Well, let's shift gears and talk about uncoupling and coupling.
Ah, the art of connecting and disconnecting the tractor from the trailer.
Exactly. Document F-35 breaks down the whole process.
Sounds like a delicate dance with those massive machines.
That's what I was thinking. I mean, it's not like hooking up a boat trailer to your car.
You're dealing with serious weight and some pretty complex mechanics.
One wrong move, and you could have some serious damage or even injury.
Absolutely. Precision and procedure are paramount.
Yeah, the document actually mentions a website where you can find more in-depth info on the exact procedures.
Oh, cool. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, me too. But what really struck me is just how essential this skill is for a truck driver.
I mean, it's not just about passing the test, right?
Exactly. This is something they're going to be doing multiple times a day, probably.
In all sorts of conditions.
Right. Tight spaces, maybe bad weather.
You got to be able to handle it all.
It's a foundational skill that goes way beyond just checking a box on a test sheet.
Agreed. So what's next on our truck driving test adventure?
How about the backing skills test? This one I'm not looking forward to.
Oh, yeah, that's a classic.
Document F35 describes these maneuvers, things like the 90-degree alley dock, offset left, offset right.
Those are some tight squeezes.
And they're not messing around either. They use cones to mark the boundaries.
So no room for error.
The examiner's watching every move but can't give you any coaching.
It's all on you. Talk about pressure.
And the scoring criteria, it's not just about getting the trailer into the spot.
What else are they looking at?
They're evaluating observation skills,
Uh,
signaling how well you control your speed.
I bet they're watching how many times you have to pull up and readjust.
Exactly. It really shows you the level of precision and spatial awareness needed to handle a truck in tight spaces.
It's like a ballet of brute force.
I'm picturing myself trying to parallel park a regular car, and I'm already sweating.
Now imagine doing that with a 53-foot trailer.
Oh, no thank you.
But it's a crucial skill, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
These backing skills are essential for a truck driver's daily work.
Think about navigating loading docks, tight turns in industrial areas.
Even just maneuvering around a busy truck stop.
It's all about control and precision.
Okay, so we've covered inspections, coupling and uncoupling, and backing skills.
That's a lot. What's next?
Well, now it's time to take it to the open road.
We're finally hitting the highway.
Document F35 lays out the on-road driving test.
Okay, let's hear it.
It's a comprehensive assessment of driving skills in real-world situations.
I would hope so.
We're talking left and right turns, intersections, lane changes, highway driving,
The whole 9 yards.
even roadside stops and starts.
Sounds pretty thorough.
It is. And the examiner isn't just looking at individual maneuvers.
So it's more than just checking boxes.
Exactly. They're evaluating the driver's overall behavior, their decision-making, and their ability to handle the vehicle safely in a dynamic environment.
That makes sense.
It's not just about knowing the rules, it's about demonstrating a true understanding of safe and responsible driving practices.
So it's about being a good driver, not just a good test taker.
I think that's a great way to put it.
I'm curious, though, how do they actually break down those maneuvers?
Well, that's where document F36 comes in.
Another document, they really don't mess around.
This one gets into the nitty-gritty of turns and intersections.
Oh, that's where the rubber meets the road, so to speak.
I was amazed by the level of detail in this document.
What kind of details are we talking about?
They have this meticulous breakdown of the steps for left and right turns,
Wow, so like the step-by-step guide.
emphasizing safety at every stage.
From checking traffic to signaling, adjusting speed.
Yeah, and making sure you're positioned in the correct lane.
It's a symphony of actions, all designed to ensure a smooth and safe maneuver.
I was reading through this and I came across something that I thought was interesting.
Oh, I.
There's a specific instruction to keep the wheels straight while waiting to turn.
That's an interesting one.
It seemed like such a small thing, but they really emphasize it.
Why do you think that is?
Well, I'm guessing it has something to do with maintaining control of the vehicle.
It's all about anticipating potential issues, right?
Like, what if you need to accelerate suddenly to avoid a hazard?
Yeah. If your wheels are already turned, you could end up in oncoming traffic.
That's a scary thought.
Keeping the wheels straight gives you more options in an emergency situation.
It's those little details that can make all the difference.
Safety is all about the details.
Okay, so turns are a whole science unto themselves.
What about intersections?
Well, the document differentiates between stop intersections and those you can drive through.
Okay, so different procedures for different scenarios.
And again, the focus is on safety.
What kind of things are they looking for?
Smooth stops, maintaining safe gaps, even hand placement on the steering wheel.
Hand placement, really?
It's all about being in control and ready to react.
So even the smallest details contribute to overall safety.
All right, we've tackled turns and intersections. What's next on our road test?
I'm guessing lane changes are coming up.
You got it. Let's merge.
I'm ready. Traffic checks are probably still a big deal, right?
Oh, absolutely. Document F36 emphasizes those checks. Proper signaling, maintaining safe spacing.
And executing those lane changes smoothly, I imagine.
Of course. It's all about being aware of your surroundings.
Especially with those blind spots.
Yeah, you got to be extra careful when you're dealing with a vehicle that big.
Not just for the driver's safety, but for everyone else on the road.
It's a shared responsibility.
Okay, so lane changes are covered. What about just, driving along?
Yeah, you'd think that would be the easy part.
Just cruising down the highway.
But even driving along has its own set of guidelines in the document.
What kind of guidelines are we talking about?
They really emphasize speed control, maintaining proper following distances.
And lane usage. like staying to the right whenever possible.
Exactly. It's all about being predictable and giving yourself as much space as possible to react to unexpected situations.
I mean, those might seem like basic driving concepts,
You'd think so, right?
but when you're behind the wheel of a commercial vehicle, it's a whole different ballgame.
With its size and stopping distance, yeah.
Those basic concepts become even more critical.
All right, before we run out of road, we got to talk about exiting.
The final act.
What does the document say about that?
I'm guessing it's more than just signaling and merging into the exit lane.
You're right. They emphasize the need for planning and awareness to ensure a smooth and safe exit.
So it's about maintaining vigilance right up to the very end.
It's like you've aced the whole test, but you can't let your guard down for a second.
Makes sense. You gotta finish strong.
Okay, so we've gone from inspecting every inch of the truck cab to mastering turns, lane changes, and even the art of exiting gracefully.
That's quite a journey. What's your overall impression?
Honestly, I'm blown away by the level of detail and precision involved in every aspect of truck driving.
It's more than just driving, isn't it?
It's like a whole science, a whole art form.
It's about safety, responsibility, and a deep understanding of those massive vehicles.
It's really changed my perspective on truck drivers.
I think that's one of the great things about these deep dives.
We get to see the world through a different lens.
And gain a new appreciation for the skills and expertise that we might take for granted.
Well said.
You know, when we're driving alongside a truck, it's easy to forget
What's that?
the sheer size of those vehicles.
Oh yeah, they're huge.
We're talking up to 80,000 pounds.
80,000 pounds.
That's like 20 elephants.
20 elephants. Okay, that definitely puts things into perspective.
And the responsibility that comes with operating a vehicle that size.
It's got to be immense.
It is, absolutely.
It's not just the weight, though, right?
No,
It's the cargo they're carrying, the distances they travel.
the constant need to be aware of their surroundings.
It's a lot to handle.
Think about it. These drivers are often on the road for days at a time,
Oh, yeah, that's right.
navigating congested highways, dealing with unpredictable weather,
All while making sure they deliver those goods safely.
goods that are essential to our everyday lives.
So those tests we talked about
Yeah.
in part one.
Yeah, the in-cab inspections, the backing maneuvers.
It's not just about making sure the driver can parallel park a trailer.
It's about so much more than that.
It's like a ripple effect,
I like that.
starting with those meticulous tests and procedures,
And extending outwards.
affecting the entire transportation system.
Precisely.
It makes you realize that even the smallest details,
Yeah.
they can have huge implications.
Remember that instruction about keeping the wheels straight while waiting to turn?
Oh, yeah. I was surprised by how much emphasis they put on that.
It seemed like such a minor thing,
Right.
but imagine you're at a busy intersection.
Waiting to turn left.
You're hauling a full load,
Okay, I'm picturing it.
and suddenly a car darts out in front of you.
Oh, no.
If your wheels are already turned to the left,
Your truck could veer into oncoming traffic.
it's a recipe for disaster.
Wow. I hadn't thought about it like that.
Keeping the wheels straight.
It gives you more control in that kind of situation
Exactly. It's all about anticipating those potential hazards
and being prepared to react.
quickly and safely.
And it's not just about the driver's actions either, right?
You're right. It's also about the vehicle itself.
Remember that in-depth inspection process.
Checking the brakes, the steering, the lights.
Everything has to be in top condition.
Because in an emergency
You
situation,
need your truck to respond.
it's about having that reliability.
So it's a multi-layered approach to safety,
I like how you put that.
addressing both the human element
The driver's skills and judgment,
and the mechanical element.
the vehicle's reliability and responsiveness.
And those thorough inspections,
You're not just a formality.
they're crucial for preventing accidents.
Accidents that could have devastating consequences.
I'm thinking about all those times I've been on the highway,
Yeah,
maybe a little too close to a truck.
it happens.
And I'm realizing just how much trust I'm placing in that driver.
And in the condition of that vehicle,
It's a lot of responsibility.
and that trust is well-founded.
You think so?
Absolutely. These drivers undergo rigorous training.
I mean, I guess we've seen that firsthand with those tests
They're constantly being tested.
on their knowledge and skills.
They're held to high standards of professionalism.
So it's more than just a job.
It's a commitment.
It's almost like a mindset shift,
What do you mean?
transforming them from just drivers
Into something more.
into safety advocates.
I like that.
We're not just operating a vehicle. They're protecting everyone around them.
It's a responsibility they take very seriously.
And that mindset,
It extends beyond the individual driver.
you're right, it influences the entire trucking industry.
From training programs and company policies.
To the development of new safety technologies.
Speaking of technology,
Yeah.
I've heard a lot about those advancements in truck safety features
Like lane departure warnings?
and automatic emergency braking systems.
Is that the future of trucking?
I think it's a big part of it.
It's pretty amazing stuff.
These technologies are revolutionizing the industry.
Adding another layer of protection.
For both truck drivers,
And everyone else on the road.
take lane departure warnings, for example.
Okay, what do those do?
They use cameras and sensors,
To detect when a truck is drifting out of its lane
and they alert the driver.
before a potential accident occurs.
It's like having an extra set of eyes watching out for you.
Especially on those long, monotonous stretches of highway.
When fatigue can set in,
Right.
and then there are automatic emergency braking systems.
Those sound even more advanced.
These systems use radar and sensors,
To detect potential collisions.
and they can actually apply the brakes
Yay.
if the driver doesn't react in time.
That's incredible.
It's a game changer.
Especially when you consider the stopping distance required for a fully loaded truck.
You need all the help you can get in those situations.
So we've got rigorous training, strict regulations,
And now these cutting-edge technologies
it's all coming together.
to create a safer and more efficient transportation system.
It's fascinating to see how it all works together.
Human skill, detailed procedures, and advanced technology.
All playing a role,
It's a complex ecosystem
but it's one that's constantly evolving
as new challenges emerge.
and new solutions are developed.
You know, thinking about those long-haul drivers
Yeah,
spending days or even weeks on the road,
it makes you wonder,
what kind of challenges they face.
beyond just the technical aspects of driving. Absolutely. That's a great point.
It's easy to forget that there's a human being behind the wheel
With their own stresses and strains. What are some of those real-world factors
that we need to consider.
when we talk about truck driver safety?
Well, fatigue is a major concern in the industry.
Fatigue.
Those long hours on the road,
Yeah, they're on the road a lot.
the irregular sleep patterns,
And the pressure to meet deadlines
it can all take a toll.
on a driver's alertness.
And reaction time.
So it's not just physical fatigue.
You're right.
It's mental fatigue, too.
The mental strain of constantly being on high alert,
Yeah, making split-second decisions.
navigating unpredictable traffic.
It can be exhausting.
It's like running a mental marathon
Every day.
on top of the physical demands of driving
And that's why those regulations
surrounding driving hours.
and mandatory rest breaks.
They're so important.
It's about recognizing the limits of human endurance.
And prioritizing safety over speed.
Absolutely. And speaking of factors that can impact safety,
Yeah.
what about weather conditions?
That's another big one.
Truck drivers often have to deal with some pretty extreme weather.
Rain, snow, ice, fog.
You name it, they've probably driven through it.
I can only imagine how challenging that must be.
To handle a fully loaded truck in those conditions.
It requires a heightened level of skill and awareness.
I bet.
Those adverse weather conditions
They can reduce visibility
make the road slippery.
and increase stopping distances.
It's a whole other set of challenges.
So it's not just about knowing how to operate the vehicle
It's about knowing how to adapt
to those changing conditions.
and making safe decisions in real time.
And
The
sometimes
safest course of action
is to just pull over,
and wait for the weather to improve.
even if it means a delay.
Safety has to come first.
It's about putting safety ahead of deadlines.
And recognizing that sometimes
The best decision,
is to slow down.
or even stop.
Now let's talk about another challenge truck drivers face.
Okay, what's that?
Traffic congestion.
Ugh, I hate traffic.
It's frustrating for anyone.
But for a truck driver,
Navigating those narrow lanes,
with all those impatient drivers around,
it can be a real safety hazard.
I've been there stuck in rush hour traffic.
Feeling that sense of claustrophobia,
And frustration.
it's not fun.
I can't even imagine what it's like in a truck,
Feeling the pressure to keep moving.
surrounded by all those cars.
It's a high-stress situation.
That requires a lot of patience
Skill.
and defensive driving technique.
It's not just about getting from point A to point B,
It's about navigating a complex environment,
an often unpredictable environment.
anticipating the actions of other drivers.
I'm making safe decisions under pressure.
It's like a constant game of chess,
I like that analogy.
anticipating the moves of other players
Being one step ahead.
to avoid those potential collisions.
It takes a lot of mental agility.
Truck driving is more than just physical strength and stamina,
It's about mental toughness.
and the ability to stay calm under pressure,
It's a profession that deserves our respect.
and appreciation.
We often take for granted the work that goes into delivering the goods we rely on.
So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, what's the key message you want our listeners to take away?
I think the most important thing to remember
Yeah,
is that truck drivers play a vital role in our society.
me too.
They keep our economy moving.
They deliver the goods we need.
And they do it all while facing a myriad of challenges.
From fatigue and weather
The traffic congestion.
and the pressure to meet those deadlines.
It's a tough job.
It makes you realize that we need to be more mindful of their presence on the road.
Give them the space they need.
Treat them with respect.
And appreciate the skill and dedication it takes to handle those massive vehicles.
Absolutely. And it also challenges us.
To think about how we can contribute to a safer driving environment.
For everyone.
Well said. Now in our final segment, let's explore some ways we can all work together.
To make our roads safer.
For truck drivers.
And for everyone who shares the road with them.
Stay tuned for part 3.
Where we'll delve into some practical tips and strategies.
For promoting safety on our roads.
Okay, we're back for the final stretch of our deep dive into the world of truck driving.
Ready to shift into gear for part 3.
We've covered a lot of ground.
The tests, the tech, the real-world challenges.
But now I think it's time to talk about how we can all contribute to making our roads safer.
Especially for those sharing the road with these massive vehicles.
Because it's easy to feel like
Well,
we're just along for the ride
yeah,
when it comes to road safety.
just passengers.
But the truth is,
What's that?
every driver plays a role.
I completely agree.
So where do we even begin?
That's a good question.
It feels like such a huge issue,
It is, yes.
especially when you're talking about these 80,000-pound vehicles.
It can be intimidating
What can the average driver really do?
to make a difference.
Well, one of the most important things
Okay.
is to be more aware of trucks on the road.
Awareness is key.
Understand their limitations.
Yeah, their blind spots, their longer stopping distances.
It's about seeing them, not just as obstacles in our way,
Right.
but as fellow drivers.
Navigating a complex system.
Exactly.
So give them space, be patient.
Don't cut them off.
Those seemingly small actions
Can make a huge difference.
in preventing accidents?
Thinking back to all those times.
What about them?
I've been in a rush,
Yeah, we've all been there.
maybe squeezing a bit too close to a truck.
During a lane change,
It makes me cringe now.
knowing what you know now.
Realizing how dangerous that could have been.
It's a common mistake,
Yeah.
but one we can easily avoid by
Like-
taking a moment
Yeah.
to assess the situation,
And give those trucks the room they need.
to maneuver safely.
So awareness and respect for truck drivers.
Those are essential
What else can we do?
to contribute to a safer driving environment.
Well, we can advocate for policies
Okay.
and infrastructure improvements.
That prioritize truck safety.
Things like stricter regulations on driving hours,
Makes sense.
investing in better road maintenance, designing highways with truck traffic in mind.
All of those things can make a difference.
It's about recognizing that truck safety
Isn't just the responsibility of truck drivers?
and trucking companies.
It's a shared responsibility.
It requires a systemic approach,
I couldn't agree more.
and it's not just about government policies.
With infrastructure.
We can also support organizations
What kind of organizations?
that promote truck drivers' safety and well-being.
Oh, yeah.
There are groups that offer training programs,
Okay.
resources for dealing with fatigue and stress,
Important stuff.
advocacy efforts to improve working conditions for drivers
It's about creating a culture of safety
that extends beyond the individual driver.
and encompasses the entire industry.
What about technology?
Oh, yeah. Technology has a huge role to play
We talked about those advancements
in lane departure warnings.
and automatic emergency braking systems.
Are those features becoming more widespread?
I think they are.
It's encouraging to see those innovations being implemented.
It really is.
You know, we've focused a lot on the challenges
Yeah,
that truck drivers face
but it's important to acknowledge their skill.
and dedication.
They navigate complex road systems,
Operate heavy machinery,
handle demanding schedules.
all while prioritizing safety.
It's a profession,
That requires a unique combination of skills,
physical and mental strength,
technical expertise.
and a deep commitment to responsibility.
You said it.
This deep dive has definitely made me rethink my perception of truck drivers.
In what way?
I see them now,
How?
not just as people behind the wheel,
But as something more.
as essential workers,
To keep our economy moving.
and our supply chains flowing.
Exactly.
And they're not just workers.
They're people.
They have families, they have lives outside of work.
You need to remember.
They deserve our respect and appreciation.
Absolutely.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the world of truck driving,
What have we learned?
we started by exploring the intricate details of those tests and procedures.
All those rules and regulations.
And now we're seeing how those seemingly small actions,
Yeah.
they have a ripple effect,
Impacting not just the drivers.
but everyone who shares the road with them.
It's a complex system.
But it's one we can all influence
How?
by being mindful of our actions
Supporting safety initiatives
and advocating for policies
that prioritize the well-being of truck drivers.
and the safety of everyone on the road.
Well said.
And to all those truck drivers out there,
Yeah.
thank you for your hard work, your dedication.
And your commitment to safety.
We appreciate you.
We really do.
And to our listeners,
Yeah.
we hope this deep dive has given you a new perspective
On the world of truck driving.
and inspired you to be more mindful
And respectful.
when you're sharing the road with those big rigs.
It's all about sharing the roads safely.
Until next time, stay curious, stay informed.
And stay safe. All right, so buckle up, everybody, because today we're going deep on something most people never even think about, but it's absolutely essential for everyone on the road. Truck safety inspections.
That's right, and you might not realize it, but before those big rigs you see cruising down the highway, even hit the pavement, they go through an incredibly thorough checklist.
A checklist to make sure everything is in tip-top shape and they're safe to drive. Now, we're focusing this deep dive on you, our listener, because you're getting ready to take your CDL test, right?
That's right.
And you want to make sure you're completely prepared for every part of that exam, especially when it comes to the vehicle inspection portion.
Yeah, that's a big one.
It's kind of like, I don't know, like if you think about a spaceship getting ready to launch.
Yeah.
You don't just, hop in and blast off. You
Yeah.
got to make sure everything is working perfectly before you know,
You got it.
shoot off into space.
You got it. These inspections are all about safety first,
Right.
preventing accidents and making sure everyone on the road gets home safe.
Okay, so let's dive into the actual inspection points, starting with one that's absolutely crucial, the brakes. But more specifically, something called push rod stroke. Can you break that down for us? What exactly is push rod stroke and why is it so important?
So think of the push rod as like the muscle behind your truck's braking system. It's that component that pushes the brake shoes against the drum to create the friction that stops the truck.
Okay.
Push rod stroke is basically how far that push rod travels when you hit the brakes.
Gotcha.
And measuring it tells us a lot about how well your brakes are adjusted and how effectively they can bring that big rig to a halt.
So I'm guessing if that stroke is too long or too short, that's going to be a problem.
You got it. Imagine, your push rod is like that muscle that stops your truck.
Right.
If it's out of scan adjustment, it's like trying to win a race with a pulled hamstring.
Oh.
You're just not going to perform at your best.
not going to win that race.
Exactly. And in this case, that can mean not stopping in time.
Right.
Too long of a stroke and your brakes are going to be sluggish.
Yeah.
Too short and you risk those brakes dragging, overheating, wearing out way too fast.
And that can't be good.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
And in a worst case scenario, it could even lead to, a jackknife situation, which is something we definitely want to avoid.
Yikes. Yeah, that's not good. Now, I noticed in the material that we're looking at, it mentions taking 2 measurements for the push rod. Why 2?
Good catch.
Yeah.
So you need to measure that push rod in 2 positions.
Mm-hmm.
Once when the brakes are released, and then again when they're fully applied. The difference between those 2 measurements gives you that actual stroke length.
Okay.
Kind of like, if you think about a spring
Yeah.
and you pull on it, you're measuring how far it stretches.
Makes sense. So that's where knowing the size and type of your brake chamber comes in?
Absolutely.
Because each one has a specific adjustment limit for that push rod stroke.
Exactly. And if your measurement goes beyond that limit, it's a clear sign that your brakes need some attention.
Yeah.
Think about it. Trying to stop a fully loaded truck with faulty brakes. It'd be like trying to stop a runaway train.
Yeah, not a good situation to be in. All right, so moving on from brakes, let's talk about the tractor protection valve. This little component sounds super important.
It is.
Right.
Because it acts like a safety net for your trailer brakes. So imagine this, you're cruising down the highway and suddenly there's a leak in the air line that supplies air pressure to your trailer brakes. Now, without the tractor protection valve, you could completely lose braking power in that trailer,
Oh, wow.
and that could be disastrous.
So we're talking like a runaway trailer situation?
Potentially.
That's straight out of an action movie. How do you even test if this valve is working correctly?
It's actually pretty straightforward. You just need to disconnect that trailer service line coupler. It's often called the glad hand.
The glad hand.
Yeah, it's like, those 2 hands shaking,
Right.
making that secure connection.
Yeah.
With the trailer supply valve closed,
Yeah.
You apply the brakes,
Yeah.
and you listen and feel for any air leaks at that disconnected glad hand.
So if you hear or feel air escaping, that means the tractor protection valve is not doing its job.
That's right.
Got it. So even if there's a problem with the trailer's air supply, this valve makes sure there's still enough pressure to engage those brakes and prevent a potential runaway situation. Okay, what's next on our truck inspection checklist?
Let's talk about the low air warning system.
Okay, low air warning system. Is that kind of like the low tire pressure warning light you see in a car?
Exactly.
Okay.
But instead of just monitoring your tires, it's keeping tabs on the entire brake system.
Right.
And, truck brakes rely on air pressure. So if that pressure drops too low, well, you lose braking power.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So this warning system is there to sound the alarm before that happens, giving you time to react.
So how do we know if that system is working the way it should be?
Well, with the engine running, you just repeatedly press the brake pedal to lower the air pressure in the system.
Okay.
Keep doing that until the low air warning kicks in.
Okay.
It could be a light on the dash, a buzzer, or both.
Okay.
You're looking to make sure that warning activates at the correct pressure, which should be above 55 psi. This gives you enough time to react and safely bring the truck to a stop.
Right.
Now, if the warning doesn't activate or activates too late, it's a major safety concern.
Makes sense. Speaking of things that seem simple but are actually super important, let's talk about doors.
Oh, yeah. Doors are crucial.
Yeah.
They're not just about getting in and out of the truck. They're a safety feature.
Right, so they need to open easily in case of an emergency, but they also need to close securely so nobody accidentally falls out while the truck is moving.
Exactly, and this is something inspectors are going to be looking at closely during their checks.
Mhm.
A door that doesn't open or close properly, that's a big violation,
Yeah, okay.
especially during your CDL test.
Now let's move on to the connection between your truck and trailer. That's the coupler, and its mounting. And I learned from the material that we're looking at that there are different types of couplers.
Yeah, there are a couple different types. You've got your fifth wheel couplers, which are those big horseshoe-shaped connectors you typically see on semi-trailers.
Right.
And then you have your pintle hooks, which are more like a heavy-duty ball and socket connection, often used for towing agricultural equipment or construction trailers.
Gotcha. I'm guessing with both types, the mounting is super important. What are some of the things that inspectors will be zeroing in on here?
Loose or missing fasteners are a big red flag.
Okay.
Even a seemingly small issue like that can have catastrophic consequences if that coupler fails. I mean, imagine the entire trailer detaching from the truck while you're driving.
Yeah, that is a terrifying thought. I don't want to picture that.
Yeah.
Now, the source material also mentions something about checking for coupler security and making sure the movement doesn't exceed a certain limit.
Right.
Can you explain that a bit more?
Yeah, so a small amount of play in that coupler is actually normal.
Okay.
It's necessary for smooth maneuvering.
All right.
But too much movement is a sign of a worn or damaged coupler that could potentially fail.
Gotcha. So how do you check for that movement? Is it just something you can eyeball?
There are a few different methods you can use. You can visually inspect that coupler for excessive movement. You can physically feel for any looseness.
Okay.
And you could even measure the movement using markings.
Okay, so we're talking about like how much play is too much play.
Exactly.
What sort of limits are we talking about here?
So for a fifth wheel coupler, the movement shouldn't exceed 12" in the forward or rearward direction.
Fair.
For a pintle hook, the limit is 38 of an inch. Anything more than that could spell trouble.
Okay. So we've checked the mounting and the movement. What about the locking mechanism itself? What are some key things to pay attention to there?
The most important thing is to make sure that coupler is properly locked, both visually and physically.
Right.
A damaged or unlocked coupler could lead to the trailer disconnecting while the truck is in motion,
Yeah.
and that's a recipe for disaster.
Right. So with a fifth wheel coupler, you'd want to check the position of the release handle and any exposed locking mechanisms.
Exactly. And don't forget to get under the trailer and visually inspect those locking jaws to make sure they're properly engaged.
Okay.
With the pintle hook, you'd want to check the latching mechanism.
Yeah.
Make sure it's securely fastened.
This is all fascinating stuff. I'm learning so much. It feels like we've covered a lot of ground already, but I'm sure there's still a lot more to unpack when it comes to truck safety inspections. What are we going to tackle next?
Welcome back to our deep dive into truck safety inspections.
Hmm.
You're doing great so far, soaking up all this info like a sponge.
It's really interesting
Mhm.
and super important for anyone who wants to, drive a big rig one day. I feel like we've already learned so much, but I'm ready
Yeah.
to tackle even more.
Well, we were just talking about those crucial connections between the truck and trailer. And I want to make sure you have a solid understanding of how to inspect those couplers. We talked about checking the locking mechanism and looking for movement visually, but how else can you really make sure that connection is solid?
Right, because sometimes just eyeballing it isn't enough. You really need to get hands-on to know for sure.
Exactly.
Hmm.
With a fifth wheel coupler, you can actually apply some force to it to really test that connection. So apply the trailer brakes, and then gently pull the tractor forward using the powertrain, and then mark the position of that fifth wheel. You can use something like chalk.
So you're basically creating a reference point to see how much it moves under pressure.
That's right. Then you do the same thing in reverse, pushing the tractor back against the trailer. And that distance between those chalk marks will show you how much play there is in the coupler. And as we discussed earlier, if that movement exceeds the limits, remember 12-inch for fifth wheels and 38-inch for pintle hooks, something needs further inspection. A solid connection between your truck and trailer is absolutely critical for safety out on the road.
It's amazing how much force those couplers have to withstand, and you know how a seemingly small amount of play can make such a big difference. Speaking of systems that are under a lot of pressure, let's talk about the air brake system. We touched on the low air warning system earlier, but what else should we know about the air brakes themselves?
Well, the air brake system is really the heart of your truck's stopping power. Unlike cars that use hydraulic brakes, trucks use compressed air to activate their brakes. And just like any system that relies on pressure, there's a lot that can go wrong.
Makes sense. So where do we even begin with inspecting something as complex as an air brake system?
First things first, you got to check that air pressure gauge.
Okay.
It should be reading within the normal operating range, which is typically between 80 and 135 psi.
Okay.
Anything outside of that range could point to a problem with your air compressor or maybe even a leak in the system.
So if the pressure's too low, the brakes might not engage properly.
Exactly. Like trying to inflate a pool float that has a hole in it. It's not going to work.
Now, another component that I've heard about is the air dryer. What does that do?
So the air dryer is kind of like the unsung hero of the air brake system. Its job is to remove moisture from that compressed air. That helps prevent corrosion and freeze-ups.
Okay.
That sputtering sound you sometimes hear from air brakes? That's often a sign of moisture in the system,
Oh, really?
which a healthy air dryer should prevent.
So how do you even check if the air dryer is working properly? Is it as simple as just looking at it?
Well, you definitely want to start with a visual inspection. Look for any signs of damage or leaks.
Okay.
But then you need to check the purge valve. It's usually located at the bottom of the air dryer. It should be open when the system is pressurized and closed when the pressure is released.
Okay.
Without a functioning air dryer, you risk corrosion and freeze-ups that could lead to brake failure. Definitely not something you want to deal with when you're hauling a heavy load.
Definitely not. Now, the source material also mentions something called the brake chamber. We talked about that in relation to pushrod stroke earlier. Is there more to it than that?
Yes. We were looking at it from a mechanical perspective before, but now we're going to look at it from the perspective of that air brake system. Each wheel on your truck has its own brake chamber, and they all need to be in tip-top shape for those brakes to work, right?
So what are we looking for when we inspect the brake chambers? Are there any telltale signs that something is wrong?
The most important thing is to make sure they're not leaking air. So listen for any hissing sounds or feel around the chamber for any escaping air. You also want to check that diaphragm. That's that rubber component inside the chamber that helps to apply those brakes.
So what should the diaphragm look like? What are some red flags to watch out for?
Well, it should be in good condition. No cracks, tears, or signs of wear and tear. If that diaphragm is damaged, it could lead to a loss of air pressure and reduced braking power.
Wow, this is all starting to sound pretty complex.
It can be, but with a little practice and attention to detail, it becomes second nature. Remember, safety is paramount when it comes to operating these large trucks, and a thorough understanding of the air brake system is absolutely essential.
That's a good point. Now let's shift gears a little bit and talk about another important aspect of truck inspections: lights. They might seem pretty basic, but I'm guessing they play a bigger role than most people realize.
Oh, absolutely. Lights might seem like a small detail, but they are crucial for preventing accidents, especially when you're driving at night or in bad weather.
Right. It's all about making sure your truck is visible to other drivers on the road, no matter the conditions.
Exactly. When you're inspecting the lights, you want to make sure all of them are working as they should be. Headlights, taillights, brake lights, turn signals, clearance lights, the whole shebang.
Are there any specific things you should look for when you're inspecting the lights, or is it just a matter of making sure they turn on and off?
Well, definitely make sure all the lenses are clean and free of any cracks or damage.
Okay.
Then check that all the bulbs are working and that they're the correct type and wattage. You don't want to have a dim headlight or an overly bright taillight. Could confuse other drivers.
Right. And I'm guessing the wiring is important too. You don't want any loose connections or anything like that.
Absolutely. Inspect those wiring harnesses for any signs of damaged fraying or corrosion. Loose or damaged wiring can cause all sorts of problems, from shorts and blown fuses to even a fire.
Yeah, that's definitely not something I want to think about. So we've covered the lights, we've covered the brakes, we've covered the coupler. I feel like we're making our way through this inspection checklist. What's next on the agenda?
Let's move on to something that is absolutely fundamental when it comes to safe driving. Tires.
Tires. They are pretty important, to say the least. I mean, they're the only things connecting your truck to the road.
Exactly, and that's why their condition is so crucial for safety and handling. When you're inspecting tires, the first thing you want to check is that tire pressure. Just like with your car, underinflated tires can lead to reduced fuel efficiency, increased wear and tear, and even blowouts.
Right.
Overinflated tires can make the ride harsh and reduce your traction.
So I'm guessing there's a specific pressure that each tire should be at. How do you know what that magic number is?
Well, the recommended tire pressure is usually listed on a placard. You can find it inside the driver's side door jamb. And here's a pro tip. It's important to check that pressure when the tires are cold, because that pressure will increase as they heat up during driving.
Oh, that's good to know. So we've got the pressure checked. What's next on our tire inspection checklist?
You also want to check that tread depth. Worn tires have less grip, which can be dangerous, especially on wet or icy roads. A simple way to check this is to use a penny.
A penny. How does that work?
Just insert that penny into the tread groove with Lincoln's head upside down. If you can see the top of his head, the tire is worn and needs to be replaced.
That is a handy trick. It's like having a tiny president in your pocket to tell you when your tires are worn out. Is there anything else we should be checking when it comes to tires?
Yes, you want to inspect the sidewalls of those tires. Look for any cuts, bulges, or cracks. These are all signs of damage that could lead to a blowout. And don't forget to check that spare tire as well. You never know when you might need it.
That's a good reminder. It's easy to forget about the spare tire, but it could really be a lifesaver in an emergency. Speaking of checking things that are easily overlooked, what about the alignment of the wheels? Does that play a role in truck safety?
Absolutely. Misaligned wheels can cause uneven tire wear. They can reduce your fuel efficiency and make that truck harder to handle. A simple way to check the alignment is to just look at the wear pattern on those tires.
So if the tires are wearing unevenly, that's a sign that the alignment might be off. What should we be looking for specifically?
Well, if the tires are wearing evenly across the tread, that alignment is likely good. But if you're seeing more wear on one side of the tire than the other, that could be an alignment issue that needs attention from a mechanic.
Okay, that makes sense. We've covered a lot of ground here. Lights, brakes, tires, and the coupler. I feel like we're getting close to the end of our inspection checklist. What else is there?
We're getting there,
Yeah.
but we can't forget about another important aspect of truck safety: the exhaust system.
The exhaust system. What's so important about that? It seems pretty straightforward to me.
It might seem straightforward,
Right.
but the exhaust system actually plays a more crucial role than you might think. Aside from its obvious job of, expelling those exhaust gases,
Yeah.
it's also a key player in noise reduction and environmental protection. A faulty exhaust system can not only be noisy and pollute the air, but it can also be a safety hazard.
Really? How so?
Well, for starters, a leak in that exhaust system can allow dangerous carbon monoxide gas to seep into the cab of your truck, which could be deadly.
Wow, I had no idea. That's definitely something you want to avoid. So what should we be looking for when we inspect the exhaust system?
We'll start by visually inspecting the entire system, from the exhaust manifold to the tailpipe. Look for any signs of damage, rust, or leaks. Pay close attention to the joints and clamps, as those are common areas for leaks to develop.
Okay, so basically we're looking for anything that seems out of place, damaged, or rusty.
Exactly. And don't forget to use your ears. Listen for any unusual noises coming from the exhaust system. A hissing or rattling sound could be a sign of a leak or a loose component.
Right, so visual inspection and listening for noises. What else can we do to check for leaks?
You can also carefully feel around that exhaust system for any escaping gases. But be careful, as the exhaust can be extremely hot.
Good point. I'll make sure to wear some heat-resistant gloves for that part of the inspection. So we've covered the exhaust system. I'm feeling pretty good about my truck inspection knowledge so far. Is there anything else we need to cover before we wrap up?
We're almost there. But we can't forget about one final essential aspect of truck safety: Emergency equipment.
Emergency equipment. That makes sense. It's always better to be prepared for the unexpected. What kind of things fall under that category?
Well, every truck should be equipped with certain safety items that could be needed in a pinch. These include fire extinguishers, reflective triangles, spare fuses, and a first aid kit.
Okay, those all seem pretty essential. But what exactly should we be checking when it comes to emergency equipment?
The most important thing is to make sure all of those required items are present and in good working order. So check that fire extinguisher. Make sure it's fully charged and hasn't expired. Make sure those reflective triangles are clean and undamaged. And inspect that first aid kit to make sure it's well stocked with the essential supplies.
And what about those spare fuses? Why are they so important?
Well, a blown fuse can disable important electrical components, like your lights or even the engine. Having those spare fuses on hand allows you to quickly fix the problem and get back on the road safely.
It's all about being prepared for the unexpected.
Exactly. You never know when an emergency might arise.
Yeah.
So it's crucial to be ready for anything. Now, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, from the intricacies of brake adjustments to the essential role of emergency equipment. You've done a great job absorbing all this information. You're well on your way to mastering those truck safety inspections.
Thanks. This has been an incredibly informative deep dive. I feel like I've gained a whole new appreciation for the complexity of these vehicles and the importance of keeping them in tip-top shape.
I'm glad to hear that. Remember, these inspections might seem tedious at times, but they're a small price to pay for the safety of everyone on the road, including yourself.
Well said. And to our listener who's prepping for their CDL test, I hope this deep dive has been helpful. Stay tuned because in our next segment, we'll be exploring some common misconceptions about truck safety inspections, and we'll discuss the importance of cultivating that safety-first mindset. Welcome back to our deep dive into the world of truck safety inspections. You know, it's really amazing how much goes into making sure these massive vehicles are roadworthy.
Oh, it really is.
Yeah.
You know, it's more involved than just a quick glance under the hood.
Right.
It's like we've been peeling back the layers of an onion, revealing all these intricate systems that work together to keep those trucks rolling safely.
And speaking of peeling back those layers, maybe let's take a moment to address some of the common misconceptions that people have about truck safety inspections. What are some of the things that you hear out there that just aren't true?
Well, I think a big one is that, these inspections are just a formality, a box-ticking exercise to satisfy the DOT. Like, if you don't see any glaring issues, you're good to go.
Right.
And that is a dangerous misconception.
Yeah.
These inspections are anything but a formality. They're a critical part of preventing accidents and ensuring the safety of everyone on the road.
It's much better to, catch a minor issue during an inspection than to have it turn into a major problem out on the highway.
Exactly.
An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right?
Did it.
It's kind of like, going to the doctor for a checkup. Even if you feel fine.
Right.
It's all about, catching those potential problems early on.
Exactly.
Now, another misconception that I've heard is that, inspectors are just out to get drivers, looking for any little excuse to write a violation and take a truck off the road.
Yeah, I can see how someone might get that impression.
Yeah.
Especially if they've had, a negative experience with an inspector in the past. But that's not the whole story. While it's true that inspectors are looking for violations, the ultimate goal is education and prevention. A good inspector will not only point out the problems, but they'll also take the time to explain, why they're important and how to fix them.
So it's more of a partnership then between the inspector and the driver to make sure that, every truck on the road is operating safely.
You guess that.
And that brings us to, another crucial point. The role of the driver in this whole process, they're not just a, passive bystander waiting for the inspector to give them the thumbs up.
Right. They're on the front lines of truck safety. They're the ones operating these vehicles day in and day out. So they need to be proactive and vigilant when it comes to safety.
So it's not just about passing an inspection. It's about developing a mindset of safety and responsibility.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Drivers should be doing their own pre-trip inspections every single time they get behind the wheel, checking all the same things that we've talked about in this deep dive, listening for unusual noises, feeling for vibrations, paying attention to how that truck is handling. It's like being a doctor for your truck, constantly checking those vital signs.
I love that analogy. And, just like a doctor, early detection is key. Catching those small problems before they turn into big ones can really, prevent major headaches down the road. Not to mention, accidents. Now, I know our listeners focused on, passing their CDL test. which is, a huge accomplishment in itself. But what advice would you give them for, continuing their safety journey once they're out there on the road as a professional driver?
That's a great question. I'd say never stop learning. The trucking industry is constantly evolving, with new technologies and regulations emerging all the time. Stay up to date on the latest safety best practices, attend training courses, and never hesitate to ask questions.
It's a commitment to lifelong learning, then.
It really is.
Always striving to be the safest driver you can be.
Exactly. And always remember that safety is not just about you. It's about everyone else who's sharing the road with you.
Well said. We've covered so much ground in this deep dive. From, those nitty-gritty details of inspecting brake adjustments to the broader perspective of driver responsibility and creating a culture of safety.
It's been a fantastic journey. And to our listener, I want to commend you for taking this step to educate yourself and prepare for your CDL test. Your commitment to safety is truly inspiring.
Absolutely. This is just the beginning of your journey as a professional driver. The road ahead is long, but armed with knowledge, vigilance, and a commitment to safety, you can navigate it successfully. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into truck safety inspections. Drive safely out there.
All right, welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive.
Yeah.
We do these deep dives all the time, and I feel like sometimes I take for granted the things we talk about,
Right, yeah.
And today we're talking about road signs,
Oh, wow.
which is something we see every single day,
Absolutely, yeah, everywhere.
everywhere, and, I don't even think about them,
Yeah, you just they're just there.
They're just there.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
for this deep dive, we're taking a look at some excerpts from ff24.pdf,
Okay.
which is, it's a fascinating document. It's all about road signs.
Mm-hmm.
But, the thing I really want to drive home today is it's not just about passing your driving test. It's
Wow.
about, the why.
The language, yeah.
Yeah, the language of the road,
Yeah.
how it keeps us safe, how it keeps traffic flowing smoothly.
It's like a silent language that everyone's agreed on.
Exactly.
You don't have to speak the same language to understand
Yeah.
what that sign is telling you.
What's it, though?
I thought maybe we could start with construction zones,
Okay, sure.
because the document really emphasizes this idea of reduced traction,
Especially for motorcyclists.
especially for motorcyclists. Yeah.
Yeah.
Why is that so important?
Think about it. If you're on a motorcycle
Yeah.
and you hit a patch of loose gravel or sand,
Oh, yeah.
that could be really dangerous.
Yes.
You could easily lose control
Right.
and have a serious accident.
Right.
And you see those signs, fines doubled in construction zones.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It's not just about the money.
Right.
It's about,
It's a reminder.
yeah, it's a reminder.
This
This
stuff
is
is-
serious.
Hey, wake up.
Yeah, pay attention.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's people working here.
Yeah.
It's a higher risk area.
Absolutely.
So yeah.
Okay. So I guess that makes sense. Like construction zones they're inherently dangerous, but
Then you go outside of a construction zone and you
Yeah.
just see information signs and directional signs and
that,
stuff.
yeah, telling you where to go and what's coming up.
Yeah.
And they have that whole color coding system, right?
Yeah, what is that all about?
So green is usually for guidance and direction.
Okay.
But then you'll see other colors like blue, and those usually indicate services like gas stations, food, lodging, that kind of thing.
Oh, right.
So it's a quick way to, scan and find what you need without having to
Read every single sign.
read every single sign. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
I always get a little tripped up by those VIA signs.
Oh, yeah.
What is the deal with those?
So imagine you're trying to reach a specific town
Okay.
and you see a sign that says Highway 101 South, VIA Highway 85.
Yeah.
That means you're going to take 101 South
Right.
and then connect to 85 to get to your final destination.
So it's like a little road map.
Yeah, a little mini road map.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Built into one sign.
Now that you explain it, it makes a lot more sense.
Mm-hmm.
Freeways always stress me out a little bit.
Yeah, they can be a little intimidating.
They can be, yeah.
Yeah.
How do the signs on a freeway help people navigate safely?
So the exit signs, they're designed for really quick comprehension.
Right.
You have
Yeah.
the arrows, you have the yellow boxes, and it's
Yeah.
all very clear where you need to position your vehicle
Yeah.
to exit safely. And then there's the numbering system,
Right.
which can be really helpful. So, for example, if you see exit 204 on Highway 401,
Yeah.
that means you are 204 kilometers
Wow.
from the start of the highway
Oh, that's
in
cool.
Windsor.
So it's like a built-in
Yeah,
distance calculator.
it is. It is.
Oh, that's neat. I never knew that.
Yeah.
That's a good tip. The document also talks about roundabouts,
Oh, yeah, roundabout.
which I feel like those are popping up everywhere.
They are. They're becoming more and more common.
Yeah. What's the thinking behind those signs?
Well, roundabouts are really designed to improve traffic flow and also reduce the severity of accidents.
Okay.
And so the signs leading up to a roundabout, they're very clear about the circular traffic pattern
Right.
and which lane to use, depending on where you want to exit.
Right. Right.
I know they can be a little intimidating.
Yeah. The first time you go through one, it's like,
Eh.
oh, what am I doing?
Right, exactly. But once you get used to them, they're actually very efficient.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, roads are one thing, but then you've got these digital signs now, these dynamic signs.
Oh, yeah. The dynamic signs.
That's
like-
okay.
That's like technology coming to the road, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. It's wild. So like, how do those work?
Well, imagine a sign that can warn you about an accident ahead
Okay.
or suggest an alternate route
Oh,
to avoid congestion.
helpful.
Yeah, they provide real-time information.
Right.
So drivers can make, informed decisions, especially in like unexpected situations.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
really interesting. I also noticed that the document talked about these symbols for off-road facilities,
Right, like hospitals.
like hospitals. Yeah. And airports and stuff.
Airports, yeah.
I mean, I feel like those are really helpful.
Oh, absolutely, especially when you're traveling in an unfamiliar area.
Yeah. If you don't
You don't know the local roads.
Yeah.
Those symbols can, guide you.
So where you need to go.
Yeah, to essential services
Yeah.
quickly and efficiently.
Right. Right.
Yeah, and then there's even more specific symbols for like train stations,
Okay.
airports,
Okay.
ferry services.
Wow.
Which is great if you're using multiple modes of transportation.
Yeah. That's really smart.
Yeah.
It's amazing how much information is just packed into these
Yeah.
seemingly simple signs.
I know. It's like a whole
Yeah.
language.
Yeah. I feel like after this deep dive, I'm going to be looking at road signs
Yeah, with new eyes.
with a whole new perspective.
Yeah, yeah.
It's pretty cool.
And you know what? It makes you wonder. With the rise of self-driving cars,
Oh, that's interesting.
will we even need road signs anymore?
That's a good question.
Or will we develop a whole new way to communicate with autonomous vehicles?
Yeah.
Something to think about.
That's a really interesting question. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us on another deep dive. We'll see you next time. Okay. So have you ever really looked at a stop sign?
Yeah, I mean, I have to, right?
Sure, sure.
Really?
But I mean, really looked, thought about what it's doing, how it works, the whole deal.
Not so much, I guess. Kind of just, see it and stop.
Yeah.
Automatic.
Exactly. But that's what's so cool about them. They're like this silent language guiding us through the chaos,
That's an interesting way to put it.
And that's what we're diving into today. This whole world of road signs and how they make our world, well, go round.
Sounds fun.
Yeah. And our guidebook for this deep dive is ff20.pdf, a traffic regulation manual. Might not sound thrilling, but it's got all the secrets.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
So first thing that hit me, looking through this, tons of these signs, they don't even use words.
Yeah, like the no bikes one with the circle and the slash.
Exactly. Or no pedestrians, same deal. Yeah. Universal symbols, bam, you get it.
Makes sense, right? You got to communicate instantly on the road. Can't have folks stopping to decipher a paragraph while driving.
True, true. It's like a global language everyone's got to understand.
And it plays into how our brains work, too, We're wired for visuals, quick recognition, road signs. Tap right into that.
No kidding. I never even considered that. But it's true. Those symbols just click, even if you've never seen that exact sign before.
It's fascinating, really.
Okay, so we've got symbols, but then there's this whole other layer, the hierarchy of restrictions. Like some signs are hard no, others are more like, maybe.
Oh, yeah, good point. It's like the difference between do not enter, that's serious business.
Right. Versus snowmobiles may use this road, which is kind of like cars, not so much, but hey, snowmobiles, go for it.
And that distinction matters, right? Keeps things moving, but safely. Each sign has its place in the pecking order.
Though I got to say, some drivers, maybe they don't always pick up on those subtleties. Ever seen someone just staring blankly at a sign like, what's this thing even telling me?
Happens all the time, unfortunately. Like, do not stop versus do not park. That's a classic mix-up. One's absolute, the other's got some wiggle room.
Mhm.
And that confusion can be dangerous.
Oh yeah, big time. Clear communications is key. both on the sign itself and in driver's ed, I guess.
Absolutely.
It's like this whole system relies on everyone being on the same page, you know?
For sure. And this manual, it's like shedding light on all those little things we don't even think about.
Right. Speaking of light, I noticed FF20.PDF had these signs designed to work in pairs, like do not stop in the area between the signs. So it's not just one sign, it's the space they create together.
Yeah, that's clever. It's like they're defining a whole zone where certain rules apply. Like imagine that near a bus stop. Do not stand in the area between the signs. Keeps folks from crowding, lets the bus maneuver, smooth sailing.
I see. It's like the signs are talking to each other, setting up these invisible boundaries.
In a way, yeah. They're working together to manage traffic, keep things safe.
All right, let's zoom in on some specific examples from this manual. First up, accessible person parking permit signs. Everyone knows those, right? Important stuff.
Absolutely. It's about more than just parking. It's about inclusivity, accessibility for everyone. You know, creating a world where everyone can get around easily.
Totally. Then there are those lane-specific signs with the arrows telling you which way to go. FF20.PDF even had ones that told drivers in each lane which way they had to travel.
Those are vital, especially in complicated intersections. Keeps everyone moving in the right direction, no head-on collisions.
No kidding.
Yeah.
And what about those community safety zone signs? I've seen them, but never really thought about what they do.
Those are cool because they're not just about enforcing rules. They're trying to change how people behave. Like highlighting areas where pedestrian safety is top priority, maybe with higher fines for violations.
So it's like a visual reminder to drivers, hey, be extra careful here.
Exactly. And on that note, can't forget about those flashing lights in school zones. They mean business.
Oh yeah, slow down. Kids are around, right?
Yeah.
It's not just about knowing the sign, it's about getting why it's there.
You got it. Every sign has a story, a purpose. And when they all work together, you get this whole system that keeps us safe and traffic moving.
Well, I feel like we've covered a lot, but I bet there's even more to uncover, right? It's like a never-ending road trip.
Yeah, there's always more to learn. Every city, every state, they have their quirks, their specific signs.
So next time you're out and about, everyone listening, take a moment to actually look at the signs, try to decipher them, get what they're trying to do. It's like a little puzzle, and it's kind of fun once you start noticing.
I like that, a puzzle.
And here's a final thought. Do these signs just tell us what to do, or do they actually shape how we behave? Like, do they make us feel safer, more responsible? How do they influence our sense of community on the road? Something to think about next time you're behind the wheel.
Yeah, I never thought about it that way.
Well, there you have it, folks. The secret language of road signs, decoded.
Thanks for having me. This was interesting.
Anytime. Until next time, drive safe and keep your eyes on the signs. They've got a lot to say. You ever think about how much we rely on road signs? I mean, they're everywhere, right? But we don't really think about them.
Yeah, they're kind of invisible, aren't they?
Totally invisible. But they're super important. So in this deep dive, we're going deep on road signs.
Right on.
We're looking specifically at this document, FF20.PDF. It's got a whole bunch of interesting signs, and I'm really curious to pick your brain about them.
Happy to dive in.
Awesome. So, like, when you look at all these signs together, what kind of jumps out at you? Any, like, big picture stuff?
Well, I think the first thing is that road signs aren't just random instructions. They're a system. A whole visual language designed to, well, keep things moving smoothly and safely.
Yeah, I never thought about it that way, like a whole language.
It is. It really is. You've got signs that warn you about road conditions.
Right, right.
Then you've got ones that tell you what to do, like instructions for drivers. And of course, you've got those that warn you about potential dangers.
Makes sense, like different categories of communication.
Exactly. And the cool thing is this language, it has to be universal, no matter what language you speak or where you come from.
Right, yeah.
Everyone on the road needs to understand it. So they use symbols and colors that are, instantly recognizable.
Okay, so let's break it down a bit. Let's start with a classic slippery when wet. I get why it's there, but why are some wet surfaces, like, way more dangerous than others?
So the amount of water matters, sure. But the real key is the surface itself.
Right.
Like a smooth surface like asphalt, when it gets wet, it can get crazy slick.
Oh,
Because there's less friction. Like imagine trying to walk on ice.
yes.
It's that lack of friction that makes it so hard to keep your balance. Same thing with your tires on a wet road.
So it's not just about slowing down. It's about understanding that your tires just don't grip as well.
Exactly. That's where your tires come in, the tread pattern and depth. Super important for channeling water away from that contact patch between the tire and the road.
Right.
Ever heard of hydroplaning?
Oh, yeah. Isn't that when your tire basically like floats on top of the water?
You got it. A layer of water builds up between the tire and the road. You lose control.
Scary stuff.
Hmm.
All right, moving on. The divided highway sign. I always found it interesting how it tells you to keep right, even when the road splits. Is that just like a rule, or is there a safety reason behind it?
It's all about traffic flow and preventing head-on collisions. Each side of a divided highway is for one-way traffic only.
Gotcha.
So keeping right keeps you moving with the flow. It's like two rivers of cars, each in its own channel.
Okay, so it's not just about following the rules, it's about maintaining that whole system.
Precisely. And that applies even when merging, which we see a lot of signs for in this document.
Well, that's right. It mentions merging left when a lane ends.
Yeah.
But what about right of way? Like, who gets to go first? That always feels kind of unclear to me.
It's a big source of confusion. It all boils down to yielding.
Okay.
Drivers in the ending lane, they have to yield to the traffic in the continuing lane. The problem is a lot of drivers think they have the right to merge, which, well, leads to aggressive driving and accidents sometimes.
So it's less about a hard rule and more about everyone working together to make a safe merge.
Exactly. Finding a gap, adjusting your speed, smoothly blending in.
Got it.
And ideally, the folks in the continuing lane should be giving you some space.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
You know, there's this thing called a zipper merge. Have you heard of that?
I think so. Is that where cars from both lanes, like, alternate?
That's the one. Studies actually show it's more efficient and safer.
Really? I never knew that.
It's true. All right, ready for the next sign?
Get me.
Okay, steep hill. Use lower gear.
This one always makes me laugh a little. Like, do people really still downshift with all the automatic transmissions these days?
You'd be surprised. While automatic transmissions are great, they don't always know when to downshift on a steep hill.
Oh,
So
okay.
using a lower gear, whether you do it manually or use your transmissions controls, gives you more power for climbing.
Makes sense.
And more importantly, it gives you more engine braking for going downhill.
Right, so you're not just saving your brakes.
It's about staying in control, especially when you're going down a steep hill. Safety first, always.
Okay, so less about being old school, more about knowing your car. Now this next sign is a serious one. Hidden school bus stop. Why is this one so important?
This sign is all about protecting kids.
Yeah.
Kids aren't as predictable as adults, and they're not always aware of the dangers of traffic.
Right.
So this sign warns you about a bus stop that might not be easy to see.
Meaning kids could be coming and going and you wouldn't even know it.
Exactly. So you got to be extra careful around schools and residential areas. Slow down. Be ready to stop even if you don't see a bus right away.
Gotcha. Kids' safety is top priority.
Absolutely. And then we've got the temporary condition signs. I gotta admit, I sometimes kind of zone out on those.
Yeah, me too. They all kind of look the same.
But don't ignore them. These are super important because they tell you about unexpected changes. Construction zones, detours, lane closures, even people working near the road.
So it's not just about following the usual rules, it's about being ready for anything.
Right on. Think of it like the road is saying, hey, things are different here, pay attention. Ignoring these signs can be, well, pretty risky.
You really have to stay on your toes when you're driving. Speaking of unpredictable, what about those animal crossing signs? I always get a little tense when I see that deer crossing sign, especially when it's getting dark.
Oh, those are important ones. And they're not just about deer, it's any animal that might be crossing in that area.
Makes sense.
Animal-vehicle collisions are a huge problem, and those signs are there to remind you to be extra careful, especially at dawn and dusk when animals are more active.
So we got to share the road, even with the critters.
Exactly. Always be on the lookout, slow down, scan the sides of the road, and be ready to brake.
Wow, we've covered a lot. It's amazing how much goes into these signs. It's like a whole secret language.
It is. And the more you know about it, the safer and smoother your driving will be.
Totally. So next time you're driving, remember, pay attention to the signs.
They're there for a reason.
They're there to guide you, warn you, and keep everyone safe. And hey, listeners, we want to hear from you. Have you ever seen a road sign that made you go, what? Let us know.
We'd love to hear about it.
Thanks for joining us for another deep dive.
Safe travels, everyone.
See ya. We'll see you, Rex.
Ever drive past a sign and think, okay, I know what that looks like, but what's the real story behind it?
Yeah.
That's kind of what we're looking at today.
Yeah.
Not just what road signs are, but,
Right.
how they make us better drivers.
Mm-hmm.
Almost like a secret language of the road.
Absolutely.
And the source material for today seems to be from a driver's handbook.
Yeah, looked like it.
And maybe from Ontario because it keeps mentioning the Highway Traffic Act.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Okay.
It's fascinating how road signs actually can reflect some broader changes in our society.
Oh, yeah.
Like, for example,
Okay.
the wheelchair symbol.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just about knowing where the accessible spots are, right?
Right.
It represents a whole shift towards inclusivity,
Mm-hmm.
and it influences everything from urban planning to vehicle design now.
Huh. It makes you think
Yeah.
the next time I see that symbol,
Right.
I'm going to see more than just blue paint on the pavement.
Exactly.
But speaking of things that make you think,
Yeah.
how about those massive trucks with the huge E red flags?
Oh, yeah.
Like, they're hard to miss.
Right.
But why are they so extra?
The source material actually describes them as bright red or orange warning flags, at least 40 centimeters square.
Wow.
Imagine the wind whipping those around.
Yeah.
Those flags, along with that oversized load sign
Mm-hmm.
that needs to be visible from 150 meters away,
Yeah.
they aren't just for show, they're crucial for safety.
Okay, I get that. But why flags and a sign? Couldn't they just use one or the other?
Well, think about it.
Okay.
Oversized loads can move in unpredictable ways.
Mm-hmm.
They might hang over the sides.
Yeah.
They need wider turns.
Right.
The flags act as a constant visual reminder, even when the truck itself is obscured.
Oh.
Plus, they're attention-grabbing even from a distance,
Yeah.
alerting drivers to be extra cautious.
So it's like
Right.
double the warning, double the safety.
Exactly.
Now, I have to admit, sometimes I get a little impatient behind slow-moving vehicles. But looking at this handbook, it's reminding me that the orange triangle sign isn't just for tractors.
Exactly. It's for any vehicle going 40 kilometers or less,
Oh.
which explains why I sometimes get stuck behind them in the most unexpected places.
That's true. It's not always tractors holding up the line.
Right.
But honestly, before this deep dive, I didn't fully grasp why that sign is so crucial.
What comes down to basic physics.
Okay.
Those vehicles can't accelerate quickly,
Right.
makes passing them tricky, especially on two-lane roads.
Mm-hmm.
So the sign is a warning
Okay.
to adjust your speed and expectations and hopefully prevent risky overtaking attempts.
Okay, so next time I'm feeling frustrated,
Yeah.
I'll remember it's not just about being slow, it's about everyone staying safe.
Absolutely.
Now, this handbook mentions something I've always wondered about.
Okay.
Those trucks carrying dangerous goods
Right.
with all the cryptic symbols on them?
Yeah.
What's the deal with those?
It's actually fascinating.
Okay.
Those safety marks, placards, or labels, as the
Mhm.
handbook calls them,
Mm-hmm.
they aren't random.
Okay.
They're like a quick reference guide for first responders in case of an accident.
Oh.
Each symbol indicates the specific hazard.
Yeah.
Flammable, corrosive, explosive, you name it.
So it's like a secret code
Yeah.
helping emergency teams know what they're dealing with instantly.
Exactly.
Oh.
That allows them to take the right precautions, keep everyone safe themselves, the drivers, anyone nearby.
Suddenly those trucks seem a lot more important
Yeah.
and a lot more dangerous.
For sure.
But speaking of long vehicles,
Yeah.
what about those trucks with the LCV placard?
Oh, yeah.
I know they're long,
Yeah.
but what exactly does that mean?
LCV stands for Long Commercial Vehicle.
Okay.
And these behemoths can be double trailers,
Wow.
stretching up to 40 meters. That's longer than a blue whale.
Wow, that's a serious amount of I guess that's why they need a special sign.
Absolutely.
Okay.
The sign helps other drivers anticipate the challenges that these vehicles present,
Yeah.
whether it's their extended length, slower speed, or the increased stopping distance they require.
So it's not just about knowing what the sign means. It's
Right.
about understanding how to drive safely around these supersized trucks.
Precisely. That's the power of road signs. They're not just static symbols.
Yeah.
They're tools for communication and awareness. And the more we understand them,
Yeah.
the better equipped we are to navigate the road safely and responsibly.
Okay.
For sure.
You know, it's funny how we think we know all about traffic lights.
Yeah.
Red, yellow, green,
Right.
what else is there?
Yeah.
But this handbook,
Hmm.
it's full of situations that I'm sure I've messed up at some point.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, the basic colors are universal, sure, but
Yeah.
there are some nuances
Okay.
that can really trip you up if you're not paying attention.
Yeah.
And some of these scenarios, like the ones outlined in this handbook,
Mm-hmm.
can really make you a more aware driver.
For example, flashing green lights. Do those mean what I think they mean? I always get a little nervous when I see them.
It's good to be cautious.
Okay.
So a flashing green light is basically telling you, proceed with caution.
Okay.
But here's the thing.
Okay.
Oncoming traffic might still have a red light,
Right.
and for pedestrians, it's not a free-for-all.
Oh.
They still need to wait for a pedestrian signal.
That makes sense.
Yeah, yeah.
I've definitely seen pedestrians just walk out when the light's flashing green, thinking it's all clear.
It's a common misconception.
Right.
It highlights how traffic lights are designed for specific movements and directions,
Okay.
not just a blanket go for everyone.
And what about those intersections where you can turn left at the same time as oncoming traffic?
Oh, yeah.
I always feel like I'm playing chicken.
The simultaneous left turn?
Yeah.
It seems counterintuitive,
Yeah.
but it can actually be a very efficient way to manage traffic flow.
Okay.
The key is observation and yielding. You have to be aware of what the other drivers are doing and be prepared to adjust your speed or position.
It's like a delicate dance.
Exactly.
But sometimes those dances turn into fender benders.
That's why it's so important to approach these situations with caution and clear communication.
Yeah.
Through your turn, signals eye contact, even a little wave,
Right.
to acknowledge the other driver.
Speaking of tricky maneuvers, let's talk about turning right on red.
Oh, yeah.
It seems like a simple rule,
Mm.
but I've seen so many close calls because people don't do it correctly.
This handbook is crystal clear on that.
Okay.
Turning right on red is only allowed after coming to a complete stop.
Right.
And when the way is clear,
Yeah.
no rolling stops.
Right.
No sneaking through if there's a pedestrian about to cross.
It's one of those rules that people tend to bend,
Yeah.
but it's there for a reason,
Mm.
to prevent accidents.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Turning right on red can be safe and efficient if done correctly.
Mhm.
But it requires awareness and a commitment to following the rules,
Yeah.
not just trying to shave a few seconds off your commute.
This deep dive is really making me rethink my approach to traffic lights.
Yeah.
I'm realizing they're more than just red, yellow, and green.
Right.
They're a complex system designed to keep everything moving smoothly and safely.
Absolutely.
You know, this deep dive has really opened my eyes. I thought I knew road signs,
Yeah.
but it turns out
Yeah.
there's so much more to them than meets the eye.
It's like we've been driving around in a world of hidden messages, and we're finally starting to understand the language.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
And the best part is,
What?
the more fluent we become
Mm-hmm.
in this language, the better drivers will be.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because it's not just about memorizing shapes and colors.
Right.
It's about understanding the why behind them.
Okay.
Like, why are certain signs placed where they are? Why are they designed the way they are?
Mm.
When you start asking those questions, that's when you become a truly aware driver.
Yeah. I think the biggest takeaway for me is that road signs aren't just instructions.
Right.
They're a communication system,
Mm.
a way for drivers, pedestrians, and even emergency responders to all stay safe
Yeah.
and keep things moving smoothly.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah. They're a vital part of the infrastructure that keeps our roads functioning.
For sure.
So next time I'm behind the wheel, I'm going to look at road signs with a whole new perspective.
Yeah.
They're not just there to tell me what to do.
Right.
They're there to help me understand the road ahead, the drivers around me, and my own role in keeping everyone safe.
And that's a powerful realization.
Yeah.
Because when we understand the purpose and the importance of road signs,
Yeah.
we become more responsible drivers, more aware of our surroundings, more connected to that intricate system that keeps us all moving.
It's a whole new world out there.
So pay attention to those signs. You might be surprised by how much they reveal about the world around you.
All right, let's dive into something that might seem, well, a little ordinary at first glance. Road signs. I mean, we see them every day, right? But you sent over this document, and I gotta say, there's a surprising amount to discover about these silent guardians of the road.
You're telling me it's way more than just recognizing stop and go. It's a whole language, really. And it's all about keeping us safe and the traffic moving, you know.
Yeah, it's about keeping things flowing smoothly, right? That's what we're going to be looking at in this deep dive. Like, what's the logic behind all those different shapes and colors? Why are some signs more effective than others?
Great questions. It's all about grabbing your attention, right? When you're driving, there's so much going on. Other cars, pedestrians, you know. Signs have to cut through all that noise.
Right, right. So how do they do that?
Well, let's start with the warning signs. Those yellow diamonds. Ever wonder why they're yellow?
Honestly, not really. I just figured, yellow's bright. It stands out.
That's part of it. But it's more than just being noticeable. Think about it. Yellow is the most visible color in daylight, especially against different backgrounds. So even on a cloudy day or, a tree-lined street, it pops.
Interesting. So it's not just random. There's a reason.
Absolutely. And that diamond shape, too. It's different from everything else. We're used to seeing rectangular shapes, buildings, billboards. So our brains immediately see that diamond, and it's like a warning, something we need to pay attention to.
Wow. It's like they're hacking our brains to keep us safe.
Yeah, pretty much. And then you've got all the different symbols and messages on those warning signs, right? Like the document you sent, it's got a whole section on those, like maximum vertical clearance signs.
Yeah, those are crucial for like truck drivers and RVs, right?
Totally. They prevent some major accidents, let me tell you. Imagine a big truck trying to squeeze under a bridge that's too low.
Oof. Yeah, I can see how that wouldn't end well.
It could cause, like, major traffic jams, not to mention damage to the truck and even the bridge. Those clearance signs, they're lifesavers.
Okay, so it's all about preventing those disastrous scenarios. What about those signs that specifically tell truck drivers to slow down on curves? Like, should everyone slow down? Why single out trucks?
Well, you're right. Everyone should slow down on curves, but trucks, they're a different beast. They've got a higher center of gravity and a longer stopping distance than a car.
So, like, a curve that's totally fine for me in my little car could be a whole different story for a big rig.
You got it. It's about recognizing those differences, that certain vehicles need a little extra warning in certain situations.
Okay, that makes sense. It's like a customized warning system based on what you're driving. So it's not just about general warnings, it's about really tailoring the message.
Right, and the document you sent over has a bunch of examples of that, actually. Like, there are warning signs for upcoming entrances, for trucks, buses, even fire stations.
Oh, yeah, and there was one for bicycle crossings too. I remember that.
Exactly. So it's all about thinking ahead, anticipating those points where different vehicles might be crossing paths, and making sure drivers are aware so they can react appropriately.
It's like proactive safety, right?
Exactly. Proactive safety.
Okay, now those chevron signs, the ones that look like arrowheads, what's the deal with those? I see them on those, windy mountain roads.
Yeah, those are fascinating. Not only do they tell you the direction of the curve, right, but the way they're placed, that's key too. Ever notice how there are more of them as you get closer to the bend?
Now that you mention it, yeah, I think I have noticed that.
Like a visual trick to
Yeah.
emphasize the, slow down message. That repetition, it creates a sense of urgency, helps drivers stay in control.
That's pretty clever. It's like the signs themselves are mimicking the curve's intensity. Kind of cool when you think about it.
Right, it's not just information, it's design.
Okay, we've been talking about those basic warning signs, alerting you to potential hazards. But I noticed in the document there were some that actually go a step further, like stop sign ahead, slow down. Isn't that a little obvious? Like, we know we have to slow down for a stop sign?
Yeah, you'd think so, wouldn't you? But honestly, not everyone does.
True, true. Some people like to slam on the brakes at the last second.
Exactly. And that can be dangerous. So that sign, it's a little nudge towards smoother traffic flow. It's reminding people to start slowing down early.
Okay, so it's like anticipating bad driving habits.
You could say that. And then another example, roundabouts.
Oh, yeah, roundabouts. I feel like those can be a little confusing.
You can be, especially if you're not used to them.
Yeah.
But there are signs for those too. Not only do they warn you about the roundabout, but they also show you, like, the direction of traffic flow.
Oh, yeah, those ones with the arrows going counterclockwise, right?
Exactly. It's like having a mini driving instructor right there on the side of the road.
Makes sense. It's almost like the roads are evolving and the signs have to evolve with them,
That's a great way to put it. They are evolving.
Yeah.
And they have to adapt to new traffic patterns and, new types of intersections and roads.
Wow. This is making me realize I've really taken road signs for granted. I just sort of, glance at them and keep going. But there's a whole lot of thought behind them, isn't there?
Definitely. There's a lot of psychology, design. There's a whole science to making sure they work.
This is blowing my mind. It's like there's this whole secret language we all understand but never really think about.
It really is. And it's fascinating once you start to peel back the layers.
Okay, my mind is officially blown. I never thought about it this way. It's like this hidden code we all use every day but never really see.
It is. And that code, it's more than just shapes and colors. There's a whole science to making sure those signs are actually effective. Like, it's not just about what they say, but how they say it,
Yeah. So we're talking like font sizes, the way the text is laid out, all that stuff.
Exactly. Think about it. If the letters are too small, too hard to read, by the time you figure out what it says, you might have already missed your turn. Or worse.
Right. It has to be super clear, especially when you're, driving at speed. Every second counts.
Totally. Things like, color contrast, font size, even how reflected the materials are. They've got to be readable in daylight, at night, rain or shine.
Wow. So there are actual people who, like, design road signs?
Oh, yeah. It's a whole field. It's a mix of psychology, engineering, design. They study how people see and understand things, especially when they're driving. Pretty cool, huh?
So it's like they're not just artists. They got to understand how our brains work, too.
Exactly. They do all sorts of research on, like, eye movements, reaction times, all that, to make sure the signs do their job.
It really is like a language, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like that saying, a picture is worth 1,000 words. They have to get the message across instantly.
That's a great way to put it. Visual shorthand. And just like any language, there are, rules, conventions that help make sure everyone understands.
Speaking of rules, the document you sent had a section on those HOV lanes, the carpool lanes. There was a sign about, not being allowed to change lanes in those areas.
Oh, right. That's all about keeping those lanes flowing smoothly and preventing people from, just using them to cut through traffic.
Yeah, you got to commit to the carpool life if you want to use that express lane.
But it's interesting, right? It's all part of a bigger strategy to manage traffic.
Totally. HOV lanes are just one example. Road signs can be used to, encourage certain behaviors, promote sustainable transportation, all that.
So it's not just about safety. It's about the bigger picture,
Yep.
making the system work for everyone.
Exactly. And road signs are a big part of that. They're like the silent conductors of an orchestra, making sure the music, or in this case, the traffic, flows smoothly.
That's a great analogy. But I got to admit, some sites can be confusing, especially when you're in a new place.
Yeah, I think we've all been there, staring at a sign, trying to figure out what on earth it means. Oh, totally. Actually, this one time, I was on a road trip, driving through this cute little town, all these narrow streets, historic buildings, and I come to this intersection with a sign that says, "No through traffic."
Uh-oh. I have a feeling I know where this is going.
Well, I was feeling optimistic that day. I thought, maybe it's just for trucks or something. So I kept going. And I ended up in this maze of one-way streets, dead ends. It took me forever to get back to the main road.
That's hilarious. A
Yeah.
classic case of maybe wishful thinking while driving. But it's a good point. Sometimes, even with the best design, the best intentions, signs can be, misinterpreted
Mhm.
or just missed completely.
True, true. It's a good reminder to, pay attention, not just blindly follow the signs.
Absolutely. We have to be aware of our surroundings, too. The signs are there to help, but ultimately, we're the ones behind the wheel.
That makes me think of those signs that seem, well, kind of obvious, like pavement narrows ahead. Why even bother with those, right?
Well, you'd be surprised how many people don't notice those subtle changes. Those signs, they're like a little nudge, a reminder to, be aware, especially in areas where things might change quickly.
Okay, so it's like creating layers of safety, the obvious warnings, the subtle reminders, and then, it's up to us to be good drivers.
Right. It's a shared responsibility.
Okay, so we've talked about warnings, instructions, and those reminder signs. What about the ones that are like enforcing rules?
Oh, yeah. Those are crucial. They keep things running smoothly and safely. Think about speed limits, parking restrictions, no U-turns, no passing. It's all about setting clear rules that everyone has to follow.
Yeah, it's like the rule book for the road.
Hmm.
And the signs are there to make sure everyone knows what those rules are.
Exactly. And those rules aren't just random, they're based on a lot of research. Traffic patterns, accident data, the specifics of each road, each intersection.
So even something as simple as a speed limit sign, there's a lot of thought behind it.
Oh, yeah. It's not just about picking a random number. They consider the road's design, the environment, the types of vehicles that use it.
Man, this is really making me appreciate how complex this whole system is.
It is. It's a testament to, human ingenuity. Our desire to make transportation safer and more efficient.
Okay, I think we've covered a lot of ground here. From the psychology of design to, how traffic rules are enforced. It's clear that road signs, they're not just, well, signs. They're a whole lot more than that.
Definitely. They're a vital part of this whole system that keeps us moving and keeps us safe.
It's funny. I started this deep dive thinking, road signs, how much can there really be to say? But I was so wrong.
It's like that with so many things, right? The stuff we see every day. We don't always stop to think about the complexity behind it.
Totally.
Right.
I'll admit, before this, I kind of just saw them as, signs, just there. But now it's like I see them as this whole communication system, a language we all speak, even if we don't realize it.
And like any language, there are all these nuances. It's not just about knowing what each sign means, but like the context, the intent behind it.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's like the one big takeaway you want our listener to remember about road signs?
That's a good question. I think it's this. Road signs, they're not just there to tell us what to do. They're there to help us, you know, navigate this complex world we live in, keep us safe, make sure the roads are used, efficiently and fairly.
Yeah, they're like our silent partners on the road, guiding us along.
Exactly. And the more we understand them, the better drivers we can be. More responsible, more informed.
Well said. Well, I think it's time for us to hit the brakes on this conversation.
Yeah. But before we do, I just had one more thought.
Oh, I always love your parting thoughts. What is it?
Well, we've been talking about how road signs are designed to be, super clear, easy to understand.
Right.
But I think there's also a certain beauty to their simplicity, the way they can say so much with so little.
That's interesting. It's like those minimalist travel posters. Just a few shapes, a few colors, and they capture a whole city.
Yes, exactly. And road signs, they're kind of like that. Each one is like this little work of art, carefully designed to, grab our attention, guide us on our way.
Okay, now I'm really seeing them in a whole new light. I might even start taking pictures of my favorites.
Huh. I wouldn't be surprised. And hey, maybe our listener will too.
That's a great challenge. So to our listener out there, next time you're driving, take a second to really look at those road signs, not just glance at them, but really see them. And, see if you can spot that hidden beauty, that clever design behind those familiar shapes and symbols.
And maybe even think about, the people who designed them, the research that went into them, the role they play in making our journeys safer and, more enjoyable.
Well said. All right, that brings this deep dive to a close. Until next time, drive safe and stay curious.
Hey, everyone, and welcome back. Today, we are going to be diving deep into something that you encounter every single time you're behind the wheel,
Okay.
intersections, and all those lines
I know exactly what you mean.
painted on the road. So we've got some excerpts from what looks like a driver's ed handbook to guide us.
Okay.
And I'm really curious to see if this deep dive can make even like seasoned drivers,
Yeah.
you think twice about how they approach those everyday driving scenarios.
Oh, I think you'll be surprised
Yeah.
by how much there is to unpack here.
Okay.
It's easy to fall into autopilot when you've been driving for a while, but, these markings and rules are like a language
Right.
that we all need to be fluent in.
For everyone's safety.
Yeah, for everyone's safety.
Let's start with something that probably sparks some strong opinions out there.
Okay.
Pedestrian right-of-way.
Ooh, yeah.
Our source is crystal clear.
Okay.
Pedestrians reign supreme, especially when they're trying to get to a safe haven across the street.
Yeah.
It even says they still have the right-of-way, even if the light changes while they're in the crosswalk.
It's fascinating how this rule is so widely known,
Right.
yet drivers still fail to yield.
All the time.
All the time.
Part of it might be distraction,
Yeah.
but I also think there's a psychological element at play here.
I think so, too.
Drivers in a car often feel a sense of urgency, and they underestimate the time it takes a pedestrian to cross.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's almost like we forget that there are actual people walking out there
Right.
when we're in our little metal bubbles.
Yeah.
Have you ever had to really slam on the brakes because a driver wasn't yielding to a pedestrian?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a heart-stopping moment, and it makes you realize how important it is to be proactive as a driver.
Right.
We need to constantly be scanning for pedestrians, especially at intersections.
Okay, let's talk about navigating intersections with traffic lights and pedestrian signals.
Right. Sure. It can be a bit of a puzzle sometimes, figuring out who goes when. Oh, for sure. Our source breaks down scenarios like green lights, flashing green lights, and those sometimes confusing left turn arrows.
It's like a dance where everyone needs to know their steps to avoid
Yeah.
stepping on each other's toes, so to speak.
Right, exactly.
And then you add in pedestrian signals and those push buttons.
Oh, yeah.
It can get pretty intricate.
I've always wondered, do those pedestrian push buttons actually do anything? Or are they just there to give us a false sense of control?
No, they actually serve a vital purpose,
Okay.
especially at busy intersections.
Yep.
They give pedestrians that crucial extra time to cross safely.
Got it.
Think about a massive intersection with tons of lanes.
Yeah.
Without those buttons, a pedestrian might only have a few seconds to cross,
Right.
which is simply not enough time for many people.
Especially those with mobility challenges.
Especially those with mobility challenges. So those buttons aren't just for show.
Nope.
Now let's shift gears and talk about those lines on the pavement.
Right.
I'm talking about those seemingly simple
Yeah.
white and yellow lines.
Right.
Our source calls them the language of the road.
I like that.
which I think is a great way to put it.
Yeah. They might seem mundane, but
Mm,
they convey so much information
Yeah.
that helps drivers, cyclists, and pedestrians coexist safely.
right.
It's all about understanding the nuances of those lines.
Our source highlights the essential difference between yellow lines separating traffic in opposite directions and white lines for traffic going the same way.
Right.
It's simple,
Yeah.
but so crucial to get right.
Absolutely. Imagine if we didn't have those visual cues.
Oh, gosh.
It would be chaos out there.
Right.
It's like trying to read a book without spaces between the words.
Right.
It would be almost impossible to decipher.
Okay, pop quiz time.
Right.
You're driving down a multi-lane road, and there's a yellow line on your left. What does that tell you about the traffic in the lane next to you?
Think about the direction that traffic is flowing.
Now let's talk about something we all do, but maybe don't always do safely.
Okay.
Passing.
Ah.
Our source uses some helpful diagrams to show the difference between solid and broken lines when it comes to passing.
Those diagrams are a great visual aid.
Yeah.
You see that solid yellow line?
Yeah.
That's a hard no for passing.
Oh.
It means there's not enough visibility or space to do it safely.
Right.
But those broken lines,
Yeah.
that's where things get a little more nuanced.
So you see a broken yellow line.
Okay.
Does that mean you're good to go and pass that slowpoke in front of you?
Not so fast.
Okay.
It means you might be able to pass, but only if a whole bunch of other factors line up.
Okay.
You need to check your mirrors, make sure there's no oncoming traffic for a safe distance,
Right.
and ensure there's enough clear space to make the maneuver without cutting anyone off. Passing safely is about judgment and being super aware.
I can already tell this deep dive is going to make me a much more careful passer.
Good.
But hold on, the source also mentions something called continuity lines.
Okay.
What are those?
Continuity lines.
Okay.
They're like the unsung heroes of pavement markings.
All right.
They might look like regular broken lines,
Yeah.
but they're wider and closer together, and they carry a very specific meaning
Okay.
that can trip drivers up.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
Yeah.
What are these continuity lines trying to tell us?
They're basically a heads up that your lane is about to change.
Okay.
If you see those wider, closer broken lines on your left,
Mm-hmm.
it means your lane is about to end, merge into another lane, or exit the roadway.
Okay.
It's your signal to get ready to merge if you want to stay on your current route.
Wait, so if they're on the right, does that mean my lane is ending?
Not quite.
Okay.
Continuity lines on the right are actually good news.
Okay.
They mean your lane is continuing and you don't need to merge. It's a subtle difference, but knowing what those lines mean
Right.
can save you from missing an exit
Oh, yeah.
or ending up in the wrong lane.
I can definitely see myself panicking if I saw those continuity lines on the left and didn't know what they meant.
It's like a little puzzle,
Yeah.
but once you understand the pieces, it all falls into place.
Okay, let's talk about stopping.
All right.
A maneuver we do at almost every intersection.
Right.
Our source is super specific about
Yeah.
where you're supposed to stop,
Uh-huh.
whether there's a marked stop line, a crosswalk, or neither.
It's easy to glaze over this stuff,
Sure.
but those specific stopping points are there for a reason.
Okay.
Think of it this way.
Hmm.
Those markings are strategically placed
Yeah.
to give drivers the best possible view of the intersection
Right.
and to prevent collisions with vehicles and pedestrians.
So tell me if there's a clearly marked stop line.
Yeah.
That single white line across the lane. I stopped there, right?
Yep.
But what if there isn't a stop line? Where am I supposed to stop then?
Good question. Yeah. If there's no stop line, you need to stop at the crosswalk.
Okay.
And this is important.
Okay.
Even if the crosswalk isn't visibly marked,
Okay.
you know those bold white stripes across the road?
Right.
It's still there.
Okay.
It's like an invisible force field protecting pedestrians.
So it's like a test of my intersection knowledge.
Yeah.
I have to know where the crosswalk should be, even if I can't see it.
Exactly. And if there's no crosswalk, you stop at the edge of the sidewalk.
Right.
Or if there's no sidewalk,
Mm.
you stop at the edge of the intersection.
Right.
It's all about creating a buffer zone
Yeah.
between you and any potential cross traffic.
Okay, imagine this. I'm driving on a dark, rainy night,
Okay.
approaching an intersection where the pavement markings have faded over time.
Right.
What's the best approach in a situation like that? How do I know where to stop?
That's where your knowledge of the rules and those invisible crosswalks comes into play. Even if you can't see the markings, you should have a general sense of where the crosswalk should be based on the layout of the intersection.
Okay.
Slow down, use your headlights, and err on the side of caution,
Right.
stopping a little further back if you're unsure.
It's like a real-life driving test out there sometimes.
It definitely keeps us on our toes.
Now, the source mentions a few other key markings we should be aware of,
Okay.
like white arrows within lanes,
Uh-huh.
pedestrian crossovers with those overhead yellow lights,
Right.
and double solid lines.
Oh, okay.
Let's dive into those next.
Sounds good. Those white arrows are like mini road signs painted right on the pavement.
Yeah, I've always thought of them as helpful hints, especially when you're in one of those multi-lane intersections with turns in every direction.
Exactly. They provide directional guidance telling you which way you're allowed to go within a lane.
Yeah.
So if you're in a lane with a white arrow pointing left, you can only turn left from that lane.
Right. And if you see an arrow pointing straight ahead, you better not try to sneak in a right turn from that lane.
Right. It's all about following those visual cues to keep traffic flowing smoothly and prevent those awkward last-minute lane changes that can lead to fender benders.
Okay, let's talk about those pedestrian crossovers.
Okay.
You know, those areas marked by double white lines and X in each lane, and those overhead yellow lights.
Yeah.
I admit I've always been a little unsure about exactly how those work.
They're becoming increasingly common in urban areas, and they're designed to give pedestrians like a super safe way to cross busy streets.
Okay.
Think of them as extra cautious crosswalks.
So if I'm driving and I see a pedestrian waiting at one of those crossovers, what should I do?
First, slow down and be ready to stop.
Okay.
When the pedestrian activates the crossover by pressing the button, those overhead yellow lights start flashing, letting you know they're about to cross.
And once they step onto the crosswalk?
Full stop. You have to yield the right of way, no questions asked. It's the law, and it's the right thing to do. These crossovers are designed to prioritize pedestrian safety, so drivers need to be extra vigilant in those zones.
Sounds like they've really thought of everything to make these crossovers as safe as possible.
Absolutely. They've added multiple layers of visual and physical cues
Right.
to grab drivers' attention and make it super clear that pedestrians have priority.
Okay, last but definitely not least, let's talk about those double solid lines we see on the road sometimes.
Right.
Our source says they're there to guide traffic away from fixed objects like bridge piers or those concrete islands you see in the middle of some roads.
Think of them as guardrails painted onto the pavement. They're there to keep us from veering off course and hitting something solid.
And often those fixed objects have yellow and black markings painted on them too, just in case you miss those double solid lines.
Right. It's like
Yeah.
the road is shouting at you, hey, don't go this way.
So the takeaway here is if you see double solid lines, respect those lines.
Exactly. They're there for a reason. Those lines and all the other markings we've talked about today are designed to keep us safe.
This deep dive has definitely made me more aware of all the subtle ways these markings are working to keep traffic flowing smoothly and prevent accidents. It's fascinating how much thought goes into something we often take for granted.
It's a testament to the importance of traffic engineering and the constant effort to improve road safety.
Now, I'm ready to put all this knowledge to the test out on the road. But before we wrap up, let's shift gears and talk about a topic that can be a bit tricky for even experienced drivers, navigating those tricky continuity lines.
Continuity lines are one of those things that seem simple on the surface, but they can trip drivers up if they don't fully understand what they mean.
I know I've had my fair share of, where'd my lane go? Moments because of those lines.
Let's break it down. Remember, continuity lines are those wider, closer broken lines that often appear near exits or lane merges.
Right.
They're essentially giving you a heads up that something's about to change with your lane.
So it's all about paying attention to which side of your vehicle those lines are on.
Exactly. If you see those continuity lines on your left, it's time to start thinking about merging if you want to stay on your current route.
Okay.
It means your lane is either ending, merging into another lane, or about to exit the roadway.
And if they're on my right.
If the continuity lines are on your right, that's a good sign. It means your lane is continuing, and you don't need to worry about merging.
Oh.
Think of it as a confirmation that you're in the right place.
It's amazing how much information is packed into those seemingly simple lines.
They're like subtle whispers from the road guiding us along our way.
Okay, imagine this scenario. You're driving along, and you see those continuity lines appear on your left. You check your mirrors, but there's a steady stream of traffic in the lane next to you. What do you do?
That's where things can get a little stressful, right?
Yeah.
First, don't panic.
Okay.
It's a common situation, and there are safe ways to handle it. The key is to be proactive and start signaling early to let those other drivers know you need to merge.
Okay.
Most drivers are pretty good about letting people in when they see a lane ending. Right.
But you have to give them a heads up.
So it's all about communication and being predictable.
Absolutely. Using your turn signals like saying, hey, I need to get over here. Can you help me out? And in most cases, other drivers will cooperate.
What about those situations where you're in the right lane and the continuity lines on your right suddenly transition into a solid white line? That always throws me off.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
It usually means you're approaching a lane that's ending or merging into yours.
Okay.
So even though your lane is continuing, you need to be extra cautious and watch out for vehicles merging from that ending lane.
It's like those lines are constantly telling a story about the road ahead if we just know how to read them.
Exactly. They're like a secret code that unlocks a deeper understanding of how traffic flows.
This deep dive has definitely made me appreciate the complexity and the brilliance of those lines on the road. Now let's shift gears and talk about stopping. Our source emphasizes the importance of stopping at the designated spot, whether it's a clearly marked stop line, an unmarked crosswalk, or even the edge of the intersection. It's easy to fall into the habit of rolling through stop signs or not coming to a complete stop at those lines, but those specific stopping points are there to ensure everyone's safety.
So remind me again if there's a clearly marked stop line. I stop there, right?
Yep.
But what if there isn't a stop line?
Okay.
Where am I supposed to stop then?
If there's no stop line, you need to stop at the crosswalk, even if it's not visibly marked with those bold white stripes.
Okay.
Remember, it's like an invisible force field protecting pedestrians.
So it's like a mental game of connect the dots I have to visualize where the crosswalk should be, even if the paint has faded or it's a dark and stormy night.
Exactly. And if there's no crosswalk at all, you stop at the edge of the sidewalk. Or if there's no sidewalk, you stop at the edge of the intersection.
Okay, I think I'm getting the hang of this. Stop line first, then crosswalk, then the edge of the sidewalk or intersection.
It's all about creating that buffer zone to make sure you have the best possible view of what's happening and prevent those right-of-way conflicts.
Now imagine you're approaching an intersection on a busy street where the pavement markings are almost completely worn away, it's dusk, and visibility is low.
Okay.
How do you navigate that situation safely?
That's where your knowledge of the rules and a good dose of common sense come into play.
Right.
Even if you can't see the markings, you should have a general sense of where the crosswalk and stop line should be based on the layout of the intersection.
So I should rely on my mental map of the intersection even if the visual cues are missing.
Exactly. Slow down, use your headlights, and be extra cautious. Look for other visual cues like street signs, traffic signals, and the behavior of other drivers.
It's like a real-world driving test, putting all those rules and concepts into practice.
It definitely keeps us on our toes. And speaking of real-world driving tests, let's talk about another scenario that can be tricky for even experienced drivers. Navigating intersections with flashing yellow arrow signals for left turns.
Okay.
These signals have become increasingly popular in recent years, but they can be confusing if you're not familiar with how they work.
I know I've definitely hesitated at those flashing yellow arrows, unsure of whether to proceed or wait.
It's understandable. They're different from traditional green arrows, and it takes a little getting used to. Essentially, a flashing yellow arrow means you're allowed to turn left,
Okay.
but you have to yield to oncoming traffic and pedestrians.
So it's like a green light for cautious left turns.
Exactly. It's a way to keep traffic flowing while still prioritizing safety. The key is to approach the intersection slowly, make sure the way is clear, and then proceed with caution.
Right.
Don't treat it like a free-for-all green arrow.
I've definitely seen some drivers treat those flashing yellow arrows as if they had the right of way,
Yeah.
which can be a bit nerve-wracking.
It's a good reminder that even though those arrows are permissive, they
Yeah.
still require a high level of awareness and caution.
Okay, one more scenario for you. Imagine you're at an intersection with a flashing red light.
Okay.
What's the protocol there? Is it a full stop or are there some nuance to it?
A flashing red light is essentially the same as a stop sign. You have to come to a complete stop yield to any traffic or pedestrians already in the intersection, and then proceed when it's safe to do so.
So it's not a slow down and kind of look around situation?
Nope. It's a full stop, no exceptions.
Okay.
Those flashing red lights are often found at less busy intersections or in areas where there might be obstructed views.
Right.
So it's crucial to treat them with the same level of caution as a regular stop sign.
This deep dive is making me realize how many little details I've probably overlooked over the years as a driver.
Yeah.
It's like a whole new world of understanding is opening up.
That's the beauty of knowledge. It can transform the way we see and experience the world around us.
Now, before we move on to the final part of our deep dive,
Mm-hmm.
I want to touch on something that I think a lot of drivers struggle with. Merging.
Okay.
It can be one of the most stressful maneuvers out there,
Mhm.
especially when you're dealing with heavy traffic or those dreaded lane closures.
Merging is definitely an art form. And it requires a combination of skill awareness and a bit of patience.
So what are some key tips for merging smoothly and safely?
First, check your blind spots and signal early to let other drivers know your intentions.
Aha.
Then try to match the speed of the traffic in the lane you're merging into.
That matching speed part is crucial, right?
Yeah.
I've definitely been in situations where someone tried to merge going way slower than the flow of traffic, and it created a dangerous situation.
Absolutely. If you merge at a significantly slower speed, you're essentially forcing the other drivers to adjust to you,
Right,
which can cause a chain reaction of braking and potentially lead to an accident.
right.
You think of it like joining a dance floor that's already in motion. You need to seamlessly blend in with the rhythm.
And what about those situations where you're merging onto a highway and there's that acceleration lane?
Okay.
Any tips for navigating that effectively?
Acceleration lanes are designed to give you space to build up speed and smoothly merge into the flow of traffic. Use that lane to your advantage. Get up to highway speed as quickly as you can safely do so, and then look for a gap in the traffic to merge into.
Okay.
Don't be afraid to be assertive.
Sometimes those highway merges can feel like a high-stakes game of chicken.
It can definitely be intimidating, especially when there's a lot of traffic.
Yeah.
But remember, those other drivers also want to avoid an accident. So signal early, maintain your speed, and confidently merge into that gap. It's all about timing and projecting confidence.
This has been a fascinating discussion about all the intricacies of navigating intersections and understanding those often overlooked pavement markings. It's amazing how much thought goes into something we do almost every day.
It's a testament to the importance of traffic engineering and the constant effort to improve road safety. The general rule of thumb is to maintain at least a 3-second following distance.
Okay.
You can measure this by picking a fixed point like a road sign or a tree and counting the seconds it takes for the rear of the vehicle in front of you to pass that point. If it takes less than 3 seconds, you're following too closely.
Okay, 3 seconds is the benchmark.
Right, and if you're driving in adverse weather conditions or at higher speeds, you should increase that following distance even further.
Makes sense. You need more time to react if things go wrong.
Exactly. It's all about creating that safety buffer.
This deep dive has definitely opened my eyes to the importance of maintaining a safe following distance. It's one of those things that's easy to overlook, but can have a huge impact on safety.
It's a subtle but crucial aspect of defensive driving.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive into intersections and pavement markings, from pedestrian right-of-way to continuity lines to stopping points. It's been a fascinating journey.
It's amazing how much there is to learn about something we encounter every day.
So as we wrap up this episode, what's one key takeaway you want our listeners to remember?
I think the biggest takeaway is that those lines and markings on the road are there for a reason.
They're not just random decorations.
Right. They're a language that helps us navigate safely and efficiently. And once you understand that language, you can become a more confident and aware driver.
It's like we've been given a secret code to unlock a smoother and safer driving experience.
Exactly. And like any language, the more you practice, the more fluent you become.
So keep those eyes peeled, those minds engaged, and those driving skills sharp.
Safe travels, everyone.
And until next time, happy driving.